Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Kyuubi Uzumaki was annoyed. Her husband had been forced to leave early for a meeting and she was stuck with the task of waking up two 12-year-olds. I had better start with Naruto. Sasuke will take a while and give Naruto time to get ready for breakfast, sighed Kyuubi as she entered Naruto's room. The room was tidy enough for Naruto, though Kyuubi had decided that her son's first D-rank mission when he was a genin was to make sure his room was spotless like Sasuke's. Kyuubi snapped her fingers and a two-tailed kitsune curled up in a basket in the corner of the room opened his eyes and ran over to sit at Kyuubi's feet. The little kitsune had been found by Naruto in the forest a year ago and quickly became the Hanyu's pet and constant companion. "You called me Kyuubi-hime?" asked the little fox. Kyuubi smiled and bent over to pet the fox on the head. "I did, Gisho," playful laughter. "I need you to wake up my son for me," said Kyuubi as she lifted Gisho up and placed him on Naruto's bed. The little kitsune grinned and started licking Naruto's face, causing the blonde boy to start tossing and turning in an attempt to deny the inevitable. Naruto finally gave in and sat up with a huge yawn that showed his sharp canines. Gisho pounced on one of Naruto's 5 tails, trying to catch the kitsune Hanyu off guard. Naruto idly intercepted the little red fur ball with his hand and gave him a light smack with the tail before setting Gisho down and entangling himself from his sheets. "Morning, Oka-san," said Naruto as he rubbed the sand from his eyes. Kyuubi ruffled Naruto's hair, being careful of his fox ears. Naruto sighed as he slipped his feet into his slippers and walked into the bathroom he shared with Sasuke. The fox boy turned on the shower and happily let the hot water wash away all thoughts of sleep. Gisho jumped in with Naruto and insisted on being scrubbed and shampooed all over. Naruto complied and exited the shower with the fox perched between his ears for drying. Naruto grabbed his big fluffy towel and dried both himself and Gisho off easily. Naruto then brushed his teeth and rinsed his mouth out to eliminate his bad morning breath. As Naruto exited the bathroom, Sasuke stumbled into the room trying to blink the sand out of his eyes. "Morning, Sasuke!" exclaimed Naruto cheerfully, to which Sasuke replied with a grunt. Knowing his adopted brother usually needed a shower to fully wake up, Naruto ignored the unenthusiastic greeting and returned to his room to get dressed while Gisho ran downstairs to the kitchen to watch Kyuubi make breakfast. 5 minutes later, Naruto was at the table eating a plate of pancakes as Kyuubi hurriedly gulped down her morning coffee and bagel so she would be ready to give the boys a foxback ride to the Ninja Academy. Gisho was enjoying a piece of chicken leftover from dinner the previous night. Sasuke ran in and hurriedly poured himself a glass of orange juice to go with his pancakes. Naruto swallowed the last bite and rinsed off his dishes before running to the door and making sure he had everything he needed for the academy while Gisho groomed himself on top of Naruto's head. Sasuke soon joined them and made sure both boys had their bento boxes. Well, Sasuke had a bento. Naruto had 2 cups of instant ramen and a can of ground hamburger for Gisho. Kyuubi handed Sasuke her bag and opened the door before transforming into her fox form and bending down so both boys could climb onto her back while Gisho climbed into Naruto's jumpsuit and poked his head out to see what was going on. Kyuubi made sure both boys had a good grip on her fur before she took off, running through the village streets towards the Ninja Academy. Kyuubi passed Hinata as the Hyuga heiress ran out of her house with a piece of toast in her mouth in an attempt to eat on the run since she had overslept because her nerves had kept her up late. Kyuubi easily caught the girl with a tail and deposited Hinata on her back in front of Naruto, who grabbed Hinata to allow her to eat her toast in comfort. "Arigato, Kyuubi-san," said Hinata after she finished her toast and the academy was fast approaching. Kyuubi skidded to a stop and bent over to let her passengers climb off. Kyuubi made sure they had all their things before dashing off towards the hospital with her bag in her mouth as villagers cleared the way for her passage. A loud yell of, "Sasuke-kun is here!" followed by a bunch of screams had Sasuke's face paling and Naruto smirking. The raven-haired boy immediately ran off from the approaching mob of fangirls. Naruto winced slightly. He had been forced to deal with a similar fan club until he had started dating Hinata earlier this year. None of the girls besides Hinata knew about his kitsune features and Naruto intended for it to stay that way. He didn't want any girl but Hinata to scratch his ears and pet his tails. Another reason Sasuke had so many fangirls was because of his dark and silent personality, traits he had developed after the massacre of his family, and that made the girls go gaga over him. Sasuke often complained that he couldn't walk outside because the girls would stalk him whenever he was alone. Naruto grinned as the dust cloud generated by the rabid fangirls dispersed and held his arm out to Hinata, who gladly took it while Gisho climbed onto Naruto's shoulders and looked around eagerly. A loud bark had Gisho on the ground in a flash of red fur as he started mock fighting with a little white puppy. Naruto smiled as Kiba approached Hinata and him. The heir of the Inuzuka clan, Kiba and his nin dog Akamaru were partners who worked together much like Naruto and Gisho. The two boys and pets were rivals over whether foxes or dogs were better and more useful. Kiba was almost as loud as Naruto, though he sometimes acted without thinking more often than Naruto did. "So you ready for the graduation exam tomorrow?" asked Kiba. Naruto and Hinata nodded. Both were eager to take the exam and graduate. Noticing that a note on the blackboard said their sensei Iruka was in a meeting and would be back in half an hour, Naruto grinned and quietly slipped away, leaving Hinata and Gisho to wonder where he went. "Hokage-sama, you won't believe what your son has done this time," said a Chunin as he stuck his head into Ken's office. Ken looked up from his paperwork and sighed. "Does it involve fire, animal feces, or sewage?" asked Ken as he mentally went over some of Naruto's past pranks. The Chunin grinned and shook his head, causing Ken to raise an eyebrow. "No, but take a look out the window," said the Chunin. Puzzled, Ken did as instructed and smiled as he saw the Hokage monument was sporting a few additions. Above his face were the words, "Best Dad Ever," while Sarutobi's face had the words, "Dirty Old Man," written underneath it. Ken shook his head and disappeared in a puff of smoke and reappeared on top of the Hokage tower where a crowd had gathered. All eyes were on the figure hanging by a rope next to Ken's face and working on the words, "This space reserved for Uzumaki Naruto." Ken grinned. Naruto had made it clear that he would be Hokage someday, though Ken hoped it was because he stepped down and wasn't killed in action. A puff of smoke next to Ken had him turn to see Naruto's sensei Iruka. "I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. I didn't realize my meeting would go so long and leave him unsupervised," said the teacher. Ken smiled and waved his hand to show Iruka was forgiven, glad Naruto hadn't defaced the monument. Iruka took a deep breath and yelled, "What the hell are you doing during class time? Get down here, you moron." Naruto started flailing his arms and exclaimed, "Yikes, that's Iruka-sensei," as he struggled to scramble up the rope without dropping the paint on one of the people below him. Naruto managed to get to the top of the monument and started to run away, only to find the back of his orange jumpsuit being grabbed by Iruka. Back in the classroom, many of the students were laughing about Naruto's additions to the monument when Iruka appeared with Naruto tied up. The Chunin sighed as the class quieted down and Naruto looked unrepentant. "Tomorrow is the academy graduation exam and you choose to cause trouble now? What will your parents think when they see what you did?" yelled Iruka, totally forgetting that Ken had been beside him on top of the tower. Naruto glanced away from his sensei and muttered, yeah, which caused Iruka to snap. "Time for a review test on Henge no Jutsu. Everyone line up. Transform perfectly into me," yelled Iruka to the class's moans and complaints. The class grudgingly got into a line and they proceeded down the ranks. Finally, it was Sasuke's turn. The raven-haired boy walked up to the front of the room to the cheers of his many fangirls. Sasuke rolled his eyes and made the appropriate seal before yelling, "Henge." A cloud of smoke hid Sasuke from view and swiftly dissipated to reveal a perfect double of Iruka in Sasuke's place. "Excellent job, Sasuke, you can sit down now. Next, Uzumaki Naruto," said Iruka. Naruto ignored the murmurs of how the whole test was his fault from some of the students and walked up to take Sasuke's place. Naruto adjusted the goggles resting on his forehead as he prepared to perform the jutsu. "Henge!" yelled Naruto as a large cloud of smoke enveloped him. Most of the smoke faded rapidly to reveal a tall blonde woman with her hair in pigtails, 2 blonde fox ears, 5 fox tails, and no clothes, with the smoke covering the most private areas. The vision of beauty blew a kiss at Iruka, whose mouth hung open for a second before a geyser of blood shot out from his nose and sent him crashing backwards. Naruto disengaged the henge with a laugh and said, "I call it no jutsu." Sasuke, Hinata, and Gisho all sighed as they pictured the lecture Naruto would get when Kyuubi heard about this. Iruka quickly recovered from his massive nosebleed and used his special, demon head, to yell at Naruto. "You dumbass, don't invent stupid skills," roared the teacher. The force of Iruka's yell blew Naruto's hair back, and the whole thing would have been very impressive if it hadn't been for the 2 pieces of twisted tissue Iruka had jammed up his nose to prevent his fainting from blood loss. "Do I have to erase the part 1 wrote for Dad's face?" whined Naruto as he looked at the part of his prank that he was the most proud of. Iruka sighed and glanced at Sasuke, who was reading a book while waiting for Naruto to finish whipping the Hokage monument clean with Gisho curled up in his lap. Kyuubi had sent a summoned fox to tell Iruka that Naruto was to clean all the paint by himself and Sasuke was to stay there to make sure he did it right. Sasuke gave Iruka a look that said, "You're the one he'll listen to." Iruka sighed and stared at the grumbling Kitsune Hanyu below him. Since they weren't in class, Naruto's fox features were visible so he could feel more comfortable. "Sorry Naruto," Kyuubi-san said all of it. "She already took a picture of your father's face and what you wrote next to it. You can't go home until you clean all of it," said Iruka. Naruto sighed and started using his tails to help him scrub all of the paint away. Iruka looked at the scowling fox boy and decided to play his motivation card. "Naruto," the Chunin hesitated slightly, causing Naruto to look up at him. "Now what?" asked Naruto. "Well, if you clean all this up I'll buy you a bowl of ramen at Ichiraku," said Iruka, making sure to emphasize the one so Naruto would know there was a limit on the number of bowls consumed. Naruto stared at Iruka for a second before a huge grin stretched across his face. "Oh yeah, talk about motivation," he yelled before becoming a yellow and orange blur as he moved so fast Iruka and Sasuke could barely see him. The paint was gone within moments and Naruto had actually run up the side of the monument and was bouncing up and down in front of Iruka. "Ramen, ramen, ramen, yay!" chanted the blonde boy. Sasuke could only stare at Naruto in shock before muttering, "Dobi," while Iruka was forced to smack Naruto on the head to calm him down. Iruka grinned as he watched Naruto slurp down his chicken ramen with a look of pure bliss on his whiskered face, which was topped by Gisho resting in the blonde's hair. It seemed that the Uzumaki men were ramen gluttons and could out-eat an Akamichi if the only thing on the menu was ramen. Iruka had one time made the mistake of saying he would treat Naruto to ramen after Naruto turned in a report on the basic abilities of Kitsune for extra credit in class without specifying the number of bowls the blonde Hanyu was limited to. Naruto had eaten 10 bowls, which meant Iruka's wallet was empty by the end of the evening. And Naruto still managed to eat a large dinner at home after that. Naruto pretended to listen as Iruka lectured him on the importance of the Hokage monument and just what being Hokage meant. Iruka figured he had heard all this from his father before, but reinforcing a lesson never hurt. "By the way sensei, I have a request," said Naruto as he placed his hands together in a begging position. "Sorry Naruto, I said 1 bowl and 1 meant 1 bowl," said Iruka with a smile. "No, can I borrow your Konoha Hite 8? asked Naruto with an attempt at puppy dog eyes that failed on the experienced teacher. "Oh this?" said Iruka as he pointed to his forehead protector. "Sorry, this is for after you graduate. This is a symbol that you've come of age. Maybe you'll get one tomorrow." "Stingy!" yelled Naruto, while Sasuke rolled his eyes and finished his bowl of pork ramen. When Naruto and Sasuke reached their house, they found Kyuubi struggling with some bags to open the door. Both boys ran up and relieved her of said bags, allowing her to dig out her keys and unlock the door. "Arigato, Naruto, Sasuke. Please place the bags in the kitchen," said Kyuubi as she sank into a chair in the living room. The boys did as they were told, making sure all the groceries were put away. Sasuke then proceeded to remove Kyuubi's shoes and place a footstool under her feet while Naruto brewed a pot of tea for his mother. That smells good son. Arigato Sasuke, my feet are killing me." Konohamaru tried to attack his grandfather again and cut himself on a shuriken. "I have no idea where he got it, but I had to give him a tetanus shot. It took all my tails to hold him down so he didn't run out of the room screaming and traumatize the other kids," said Kyuubi before she took a sip of the tea. "Now Naruto, what is this I heard about you developing a new jutsu?" asked Kyuubi as she fixed a look on her son that showed she had heard about his prank in class. Naruto gulped and was just about to give a half-hearted excuse that he had to study for the exam when the door opened and Ken walked into the room. "You made a new jutsu, son? Well, let's see it," said the Hokage. He knew Naruto had made a prank jutsu, but he didn't know what it was. Naruto shot Sasuke a look that pleaded for help, but the raven-haired boy just smirked and said, "You're on your own, bro," which caused Naruto's heart to plummet. Naruto gathered his chakra and formed the seal for henge. "Behold!" yelled the blonde before he was hidden from view by a cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, a clothed version of Naruto's no jutsu form was standing in front of his audience. Ken took one look and started laughing. "Let me guess, the real version has no clothes on, right?" he gasped before collapsing on the couch. Kyuubi scowled at Naruto, who panicked and reverted to his normal appearance. "Naruto, I know that playing tricks is in your blood, but please don't act like a pervert. Look at your father sensei, he spends all his time peeping on host springs and writing those dirty novels. And the fact that you got the proportions so nicely shows you've been working on that for a while. If I was to search your room, would I find any of Kakashi's little books or dirty magazines hidden in there?" asked Kyuubi. Naruto gasped and stared at his mother in shock. "No way, I would never read those kind of books or magazines. Not even for 100 bowls of ramen. I just used your height for the legs and guessed the rest," yelled Naruto. Kyuubi's scowl softened and she giggled before pulling Naruto into her arms for a hug. "I know, Naruto, you aren't a pervert," she said as she whipped the tears that threatened to fall from his eyes. Silently, Kyuubi resolved to tie Jiraiya up and lock him in a room with Tsunade the next time she saw them together so the legendary healer could punish her old teammate for trying to corrupt her son. "I'm very flattered that you used me as a reference, but don't use that skill again." Naruto nodded, while Sasuke was hiding his face in the pages of his book, hoping his mom didn't think of checking his room. Sasuke had hidden some scrolls that he salvaged from his clan library in his room, and one was titled How to Please Your Spouse. Though he hadn't read it yet, and didn't plan to until he knew who he wanted to marry, Sasuke knew that making sure that both people in a relationship were happy was important and didn't want to lose this guide. Ken finally recovered from his laugh attack and ruffled both boys' hair before heading into the kitchen to start the rice for their dinner. The next day, Naruto, with Gisho wrapped around his shoulders, Hinata, and Sasuke were in their seats at the academy 15 minutes early and eagerly awaiting the announcement of what they would have to do to pass the graduation exam. Iruka stood in front of the class and read off of a clipboard. "Now, for the graduation exam, you will do the Bushin no Jutsu. When you are called, come to the next room." Naruto pouted, he had been hoping for something a little more exciting. "Well, it isn't my best skill, but it isn't my worst," he thought. His best skill was the Henge no Jutsu, while Kawarimi no Jutsu was his worst. He could do it, but he had to be extra careful when doing it so he didn't switch himself with something bigger than himself because of his huge chakra. Unknown to anyone, Naruto's chakra system was acting up today. If Hinata had looked at Naruto with her Byakugan, she would have seen what looked like a sixth tail starting to grow out from the location of his other tails, as well as more chakra pathways spreading through his fingers and feet. But Hinata hadn't looked at Naruto with her bloodline active and couldn't see these important details. Naruto entered the room where Iruka and the other teacher, Mizuki, sat behind a desk with a bunch of Konoha Hite 8 resting in neat rows on the top. "Here I go," thought Naruto as he formed the seal and yelled, "Bushin." There was a puff of smoke and Naruto turned to see two dead-looking clones lying on the floor beside him. Naruto and Iruka's faces both bore looks of confusion. Naruto normally was good enough at managing his chakra that Iruka would have expected at least one good clone. Naruto's confusion was due to the fact that he had performed a perfect Bushin earlier this week in practice with his father. "Can I try again, Iruka-sensei? I'm feeling a little strange today and that might be throwing me off," asked Naruto. Iruka nodded before Mizuki could make a comment. Naruto tried again, this time concentrating really hard on what he was doing. The smoke appeared and disappeared to reveal a chibi Naruto that yawned and sent to sleep. "I'm sorry, Naruto, maybe you can try again later," said Iruka with a frown. Naruto hung his head in shame. "Iruka-sensei," said Mizuki. "He is the Hokage's son and he technically did make a clone that would distract an opponent. We could let him pass." The blonde teacher was interrupted by Naruto, surprisingly. No way, I'm not willing to graduate just because my dad is the Hokage. That wouldn't be fair to all the others who didn't pass, exclaimed Naruto. Iruka smiled and said, "You're right, Naruto, your attitude is definitely right for Genin level, and I'm sorry you couldn't make it." Naruto sighed and said, "Yeah. Look, can you not tell my parents? I want to go and tell them myself after class. I'll lay low, since I don't want to make a big deal about it." Iruka nodded. He knew that Naruto wanted to make his parents proud, and going to tell them in person would show how mature he was and that he would be ready with a little more practice. There were only a few students left, so Naruto ran out of the room saying he had to visit the bathroom and hid until class was dismissed. Naruto was walking through a back alley towards the Hokage tower to tell his father the bad news. He didn't want the villagers to see that he failed and bring disgrace to his family. Naruto stopped as his nose detected the presence of Mizuki behind him. "Mizuki-sensei?" asked the boy to show he knew the older man was there. "Naruto, Iruka agreed to a special test for you. You have to sneak a certain scroll out of the Hokage library and bring it to me in this clearing." Here Naruto was handed a small map that showed the way to a clearing with a small shed in it. "You can graduate if you show me one of the techniques from this scroll." Naruto's face lit up and he tackled Mizuki in a hug. "Thanks, sensei," exclaimed Naruto before dashing off towards his dad's office. He knew his dad's habits well. He would be taking his lunch break at the hospital with his mom so they could spend some time together. Naruto strolled past the Junin guards towards his dad's office, having used a henge to make his goggles into a Hite 8 and a genjutsu of Gisho on his shoulders and looking like he was delivering the results of the exam to his dad's office. The guards smiled at Naruto and let him in, not even thinking to check for genjutsu. Naruto grinned as he picked the lock on the library door, his fox hearing allowing him to hear the tumblers falling into place. Naruto quickly found the scroll Mizuki had mentioned and used a henge on it to make it into Gisho before sticking a post-it note in the scroll's shelf that said, "Will return soon," so his dad wouldn't send the Anbu after him. With the fake Gisho now under his jacket, Naruto ran out past the guards, who smiled and waved at him again. Naruto easily made his way to the clearing and decided to take a look at the scroll. "Let's see, the first skill is Kage Bushin no Jutsu. This looks cool," said Naruto as he started practicing the jutsu. "Where is that Dobi?" exclaimed Sasuke. The Uchiha boy and Hyuga heiress had been searching for Naruto after he didn't return from the restroom. They had waited for 15 minutes before starting to get worried. Upon reaching the bathrooms, Sasuke had gone in to see if Naruto was inside throwing up or had diarrhea. The bathroom was empty, as was the girls when Hinata checked to make sure Naruto didn't go in there by accident and get knocked unconscious by an enraged girl. Gisho started sniffing around the bathrooms and found Naruto's scent. The three hurried after their friend, following his scent to the Hokage tower. Without a word to the guards, the two graduates ran inside. One of the guards ran after them, not recognizing either of them at the speed they were moving, but was unable to keep up with the fast pace Sasuke set and accidentally slammed into a door that opened just after the two kids passed it. Bursting into the Hokage's office, Sasuke found himself staring at his adopted dad's desk since Ken was still on his lunch break. Gisho followed Naruto's scent to the Hokage library, where Hinata spotted a paperclip used to pick the lock. Naruto's scent led to the place where the scroll of forbidden seals had rested. There they found the note that Naruto had written. It was at this moment Ken walked into his office to find his adopted son and his son's girlfriend standing in his private library, and the scroll that he knew had been there when he was checking for something earlier that day wasn't there anymore. "Hokage-sama, we think Naruto took the scroll that was here," said Hinata. Ken examined the note. It was Naruto's handwriting. "Damn, this is bad. That scroll has many dangerous jutsu inside it that the previous Hokages sealed away. Why would Naruto take it?" exclaimed Ken. Sasuke thought carefully about what had happened after Naruto left the examination room. He had been listening to the birds outside the classroom and had heard Naruto yelling something about not passing because he was the son of the Hokage faintly. He had ignored it, thinking someone was using Naruto to suck up to his dad, but now he wasn't so sure. "He might have failed the graduation exam," said Sasuke slowly. Ken, Hinata, and Gisho all turned to look at Sasuke in shock. "What was the exam?" asked Ken. When he heard Bushin no Jutsu, his frown deepened. "Naruto did a perfect Bushin no Jutsu when we were training last week." You were hiding from your fangirls, so you probably didn't see Sasuke, but he knows that jutsu. How could he have failed? Regardless, I want the two of you to go look for him. Iruka is going to be here in 5 minutes to discuss the exam results, and I'll ask him about Naruto. If you find Naruto, I want you two to stay with him. Sasuke and Hinata nodded and followed Gisho as he raced after his master's scent. Ken sighed and chucked a kunai at a wanted poster featuring a man with long black hair and yellow snake eyes. This just isn't my day, sighed the Hokage as he sank into his chair to await Iruka and call his wife to ask her to come to his office as soon as possible. When Iruka heard what Naruto did, he immediately set out to look for his student. Passing Hinata and Sasuke, Iruka told them to stay back and let him investigate the situation before they made an appearance. Naruto was exhausted. He had been practicing for a while and he had finally gotten the jutsu down. Naruto looked up as his nose picked up Iruka's scent. The Chunin loomed over Naruto with his hands on his knees. "I found you," gasped Iruka. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and grinned sheepishly. "Hee, you found me, I've only learned one skill." Iruka stared at Naruto, confused about why the boy had the scroll of seals when he could have practiced in an empty classroom. "Naruto, why did you bring that scroll here?" he asked. Naruto tilted his head to the side in confusion as he said, "Mizuki-sensei told me about it and about this place. He said that if I showed you a skill from this scroll that I'd definitely graduate." Iruka suddenly pushed Naruto in the chest hard, sending the blonde flying backwards. Naruto watched in shock as a hail of kunai pinned Iruka to the shed's outside wall. Naruto skidded to a stop and saw Mizuki crouched on a tree branch with 2 giant shuriken on his back. "Nice job in finding him," said the blonde Chunin. Iruka grabbed one of the kunai pinning him to the wall and grunted, "Now I get it. You planned all this as soon as you heard Naruto's speech on not getting a pass because of his father being the Hokage. You knew he would jump at the chance to prove he was worthy of graduating." Mizuki sneered and said, "Naruto, give me the scroll." Naruto looked from one teacher to another and yelled, "What the hell is going on here?" Iruka pulled a kunai from his chest as he yelled, "Naruto, don't give him that scroll even if you die. That is a dangerous scroll that has forbidden ninjutsu sealed within it. Mizuki used you in order to get his hands on it." Mizuki smirked and said, "That's right, that scroll has a jutsu that will give a person the power of a demon. It's useless to a half-breed like you." Naruto crouched down, chakra flaring around him as he battled to keep his emotions under control. Just before he was about to snap, Naruto heard a voice that calmed him down a bit. "Huh, letting a prejudiced bigot like him get to you, Dobi?" asked Sasuke as he landed beside Naruto. Hinata was on his other side and Gisho had placed himself in front of them. Mizuki grinned evilly as he pulled one of the giant shuriken from his back. "You pathetic little kids, he's nothing but a filthy half-demon," he yelled as he spun the weapon in preparation to throw it. Sasuke glared at Mizuki and flashed his hands through some seals. "Kaden Gukaku no Jutsu," yelled Sasuke inside his head as he finished with the tiger seal and expelled chakra and air from his lungs. A giant fireball shot towards Mizuki, who easily leapt over it and threw the giant shuriken towards the 3 friends. "Cage Shuriken no Jutsu," yelled Mizuki and the giant shuriken became 5 giant shuriken. Naruto and Sasuke's eyes widened and they prepared to leap out of the way. But Hinata leapt towards the incoming weapons. "I have to protect them. I won't let my friends be hurt because I was too scared to move," she thought before yelling, "Hake Sho Kaden," before releasing chakra from all the opening points on her body and spinning like a top. A blue wave of chakra surrounded Hinata and sent the giant shuriken flying back towards Mizuki, who pulled a quick kawarimi to avoid them. Hinata landed, exhausted from executing her clan's absolute defense. Sasuke darted forward to catch her and felt a huge surge of chakra behind him. Iruka managed to unpin himself and darted in front of his students. "I won't let you harm them, Mizuki," he yelled as he gripped a kunai tightly and prepared to defend his charges. Iruka suddenly collapsed, a strange paralysis coming over him. "Poison," he thought. Mizuki grinned sadistically and yelled, "I forgot, my kunai were all poisoned. Hurry up and die," before charging towards the group with his last giant shuriken spinning in his hand like a buzz saw. "So this is it," thought Iruka. Sasuke looks drained and Hinata is out cold. There is no way Naruto can dodge in time carrying that scroll, and he won't abandon his friends. An orange blur suddenly shot over Iruka's head and slammed into Mizuki's stomach, sending the traitor skidding across the ground. The blur turned into Naruto, who was crouching on the ground between Iruka and Mizuki. "Naruto, take the scroll and run," yelled Iruka. Naruto's head turned to look at Iruka, and the Chunin gasped along with Sasuke and Hinata, who had revived thanks to Sasuke shaking her. Naruto's normally bright blue eyes were now solid red, and he radiated an aura of power. The same thought raced through all three minds. "Naruto, you should not have done that," growled Mizuki as he started to get up. Naruto turned to glare at him and started talking in a voice that was totally different from his usual cheerful tone. "Don't touch Iruka-sensei, Sasuke, or Hinata-chan. I'll kill you." This voice was almost evil, and Hinata shuddered at the sound of it. Mizuki prepared to make his move, saying, "Shut up. A punk like you I'll kill in one shot." Naruto placed his hands together so the index fingers were forming a cross seal. "Try it, trash. I'll return the pain 1,000 times over. Then do it, half-breed," roared Mizuki. Iruka, Sasuke, and Hinata's eyes widened as Naruto roared. Kage Bushin no Jutsu, and the clearing was filled with Naruto clones. As Mizuki looked around in a panic, the Naruto clones all yelled, "What's wrong? Come at me. Weren't you going to kill me in one shot?" Naruto's friends and teachers stared at him in amazement as he yelled, "Well then, I'll start things off," and all the clones charged Mizuki. The traitor screamed as the clones delivered a series of power-filled kicks and punches before disappearing after landing their blow. Finally, only one Naruto was left, and he charged Mizuki, who was barely standing. "Kasi Sume, force of flame claw," yelled Naruto as fire gathered around his claws and he slashed towards Mizuki. Mizuki collapsed to the ground, his right arm torn off completely by Naruto's last attack. Naruto turned and walked towards Iruka, Sasuke, and Gisho. The fox whimpered as he caught Naruto's scent. Hinata saw that Naruto's eyes were still red and realized that he was still in combat mode. She scrambled out of Sasuke's arms and ran towards Naruto, ignoring her friend and teacher's cries to come back. Hinata stopped a few feet in front of Naruto, who stared at her with his red eyes. "Naruto-kun, you can calm down. We're safe." Naruto didn't say anything except to step towards Hinata slowly, his nose twitching as he sniffed her. Hinata let him come closer, holding her arms out to her sides so he could see her hands. As Naruto got nose to nose with Hinata, she suddenly hugged him and whispered, "Please come back to me, Naruto-kun," and kissed Naruto on the lips. Naruto's body seemed to pulse with chakra for a second before his eyes returned to normal, and he collapsed against Hinata and instinctively wrapped his arms around her. "Hinata, what happened?" he whispered. "You just finished growing your sixth tail," said Kyuubi's voice. Naruto raised his head to see her helping Iruka sit up while Ken supported Sasuke. "It was supposed to grow in tonight, but I think puberty messed up your body. Your body needed time to adjust to the additional chakra your new tail grants you, so your chakra system was screwed up. That's why you couldn't do Bushin no Jutsu," she continued. "When you got angry at Mizuki, your kitsune blood took over and you used your claws to slice off his arm. But now I'm going to make that seem like nothing compared to what I'm about to do." As Kyuubi finished talking, she strode towards Mizuki and rolled up the sleeves of the lab coat she wore at the hospital. With a quick jutsu, Kyuubi stopped the blood from flowing from the stump where Mizuki's right arm used to be. As the traitor stared at her in confusion, Kyuubi's eyes turned red and she projected a large aura of killing intent. "Dear, do you mind if I make his death extremely long and painful?" she asked her husband. Ken nodded. He knew better than to deny his wife her vengeance. Kyuubi's hand started glowing green and the chakra formed a blade around her right hand. "Chakra Enjadu, chakra scalpel. It can cut through muscles and arteries or break bones without breaking the skin that covers them," said Kyuubi calmly, as if she was talking about the weather. Ken shuddered. He had only seen Kyuubi in this mood a few times, and that was when Naruto or the other people she was close to were threatened. Kyuubi advanced on Mizuki, who was too scared to even think of moving. Kyuubi noted that Naruto's Bushins had made sure to kick or punch every part of Mizuki's body, including her current target. Kyuubi raised her right hand and brought it down right between Mizuki's legs. The man screamed in pain as Kyuubi forever removed the possibility of him having children or even becoming aroused. Kyuubi disengaged the chakra enjadu and her hands then formed several hand seals that caused more green chakra to form around her hands. Hanketsu Kaigyoko, anti-blood clotting, no jutsu. It is used in cases when you want a person to bleed freely, like to drain poison from their system. It prevents the blood in a targeted area from clotting. In this case, the target is where I just cut. Ken and Iruka both winced, vowing to never get on Kyuubi's bad side. "He's all yours, darling," said Kyuubi as she left Mizuki to her husband's care. Ken slung Mizuki over his shoulder and said, "Morino Ibiki is waiting to have a little chat with you," before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Kyuubi smiled and started removing the paralyzing potion from Iruka's body. As soon as the Chunin had full control over his body, he sat up and said, "Naruto, come over here. There's something I want to give you." When Naruto was in front of him, Iruka said, "Close your eyes." Naruto shrugged and did as he was told. Naruto waited for something to happen and felt Iruka adjusting his goggles. His ears twitched as he heard Hinata gasp softly and Sasuke grunt in surprise. "Sensei, can I look now?" asked Naruto. "Okay, you can open your eyes," said Iruka. Naruto did as instructed and saw Iruka smiling at him while holding his goggles. Iruka's forehead was bare and everyone was staring at Naruto's head. "Congratulations on graduating. Let's celebrate, I'll buy you a bowl of ramen," said Iruka. Naruto bowed his head for a minute before glomping Naruto and causing the teacher to exclaim, "Hey, that hurts." Kyuubi swept Naruto up in her arms and tails to hug him as she said, "I'm so proud of you, Naruto. You mastered a Junin-level jutsu to save Hinata, Iruka, and Sasuke. And don't worry about the ramen bill, Iruka, I'll be paying for tonight." After all, how often does a mother see both her boys graduate from the academy? Sasuke and Naruto stared at each other for a second before grinning and giving themselves a high five. Hinata smiled as Naruto's tails wrapped around her waist to hug her while he congratulated his brother. Gisho was running in between everyone's feet and barking happily. Ken returned from dropping off Mizuki and the whole group went to Ichiraku to get dinner. "I'm impressed, Naruto. I thought you would try to act all macho for your picture," said Ken as he looked at the picture of Naruto that would go in the ninja registration book. Naruto had chosen to have Gisho perched on top of his head with his fox features showing. Both Gisho and Naruto sported identical foxy grins and Ken had to smile at the photo. Sarutobi, who was sitting in to watch the next generation of ninja hopefuls, also smiled at the picture of the boy he considered a second grandson. Naruto sometimes came to the former Hokage for advice when his father was away from Konoha or in a private meeting, so he was quite fond of the blonde Hanyu. Naruto smiled as Gisho gave a short yawn from on top of his head. Both of them were proud to have gotten a good shot that would show both of them at their best. Two pairs of fox ears and two noses suddenly twitched as they detected someone by the door, someone familiar. Naruto smiled and used one of his tails to grab a kunai and conceal it in the tail's grasp. The door suddenly burst open and a little boy yelled, "Big bro. Fight me," as he lunged towards the seated Naruto with a shuriken in his hand. Naruto grinned as he prepared to show Sarutobi's grandson Konohamaru that he wasn't ready for the Hokage name for the third time this week. The little boy idolized Naruto and had made it his goal to become as good as his hero was. Before Naruto could even begin to move, a person could be heard approaching. "Oh, not again," yelled the person just before they skidded to a stop in the door. It was Konohamaru's sensei Ebisu. The teacher's entrance was all the distraction Konohamaru needed to trip on his scarf and fall flat on his face. As Ebisu gasped in shock, Konohamaru angrily climbed to his feet. "You idiot, you startled me and gave away my position," yelled the boy as he chucked the shuriken at Ebisu, only to watch the man catch the weapon between two fingers. Naruto grinned and placed his kunai in his holster before standing up and stretching. "Well, Dad, I'm off to relax for the rest of the day. I'll see you at home tonight," said Naruto. Ken nodded and Naruto ran out the door with Gisho at his heels. As they walked down the street towards the Hyuga house to meet up with Hinata, Naruto smiled as his ears and nose revealed Konohamaru shadowing him by hiding behind telephone poles. Naruto spun around and stared at a particular section of the fence that had the boards running horizontally as opposed to the vertical boards that made up the rest of the fence. "You aren't fooling anyone, Konohamaru. I can smell you hiding there," called Naruto as he pointed to Konohamaru's hiding place. The young ninja wannabe lowered his camouflage cloth and smirked at Naruto. "Just what I expected from my arch-rival," exclaimed Konohamaru as he put away the cloth and walked up to Naruto. Naruto sighed and put his hands on his hips. "What do you want, Konohamaru? I wanted to spend today with my friends since we're being divided into our genin teams tomorrow and might not get to spend as much time together as usual." Konohamaru scowled and yelled, "I want you to teach me that no jutsu you defeated Iruka-sensei with. Please, I need it to beat 4 eyes." Naruto scratched the back of his head. He knew he shouldn't teach Konohamaru the jutsu, but the small devil Naruto was making a very convincing argument in the young boy's favor while the angel Naruto could be seen acting like he wasn't listening. Konohamaru started begging on hands and knees and Naruto finally had enough. "Alright, I'll teach you the jutsu, just leave me alone," exclaimed Naruto. He then led Konohamaru to one of the forest training grounds that had some soda machines under a wooden awning. "Okay. The basics are to picture the prettiest woman you can without clothes and use henge to transform into her. Now do it," yelled Naruto. Konohamaru formed the seals Naruto showed to him and yelled, "Transform." The usual cloud of smoke appeared to obscure Konohamaru from view. When the smoke cleared, Naruto saw an, thankfully clothed in a swimsuit, extremely fat girl that no guy would even glance at. "No, more slender, more beautiful," yelled Naruto. Gisho howled in agony and tried to scratch his eyes out, yelling, "Ah, my virgin eyes. Why was I cursed to see such a sight? Oh, the agony." At this moment, Ebisu was searching for his student. "Huh? Damn, he got away again," yelled the tutor as he looked around Ken's office for a sign of Konohamaru. Ebisu had been trying to suck up to Sarutobi and Ken when Konohamaru slipped out and neither the present or past Hokage wanted to let the annoying man drive Konohamaru into hiding. "Looks like he followed my son," said Ken with a smirk. He knew Ebisu disliked Naruto ever since the boy rigged a bucket of paint to fall on the tutor when he was trying to teach Naruto. Naruto had wanted to go to the academy with Sasuke and Hinata, not get pampered with a tutor, and decided the best way to convince his parents of this was to make the tutor's life a living hell. Ebisu's first day on the job resulted in him going home early covered in paint, feathers, mud, glue, some leftovers that had started to mold, and the contents of a stink bomb. Ken and Kyuubi had asked Naruto why he had done such a large-scale prank and the Hanyu boy had yelled that he didn't want special treatment because he was Ken's son. The special tutor had hated Naruto ever since and the feeling was mutual. Ebisu ran out of the office to hunt down his wayward student and Naruto. Naruto and Konohamaru were sitting on a log drinking some sodas while they waited for Konohamaru's chakra to refill. Naruto was telling the younger boy some of the pranks he had played recently that he hadn't heard about, while Konohamaru listened eagerly to his idol. Naruto even showed the kid Kage Bushin no Jutsu, which got a squeal of "Sugoi" from Konohamaru. Soon, though, Konohamaru's happy mood evaporated and he started to look rather depressed. Seeing his young protege so down in the dumps, Naruto asked what was wrong. "You're lucky, Naruto Ni-chan. You've gotten people to respect you for your skills instead of your family. Even though everyone knows my name is Konohamaru, nobody ever calls me that. When everyone sees me or calls me, all they see is Sandame's grandson. Nobody except you, your parents, Hinata Ne-chan, and Sasuke Ni-chan call me Konohamaru and I'm sick of that." Naruto grimaced. He knew what it was like to be addressed with respect only because of his family. Many villagers called him honored son in an attempt to gain favor with his family and him. Only the people that knew him well called him Naruto. Naruto had also seen an occasional glance of fear sent in his direction over the years as his tails grew in and he became stronger if his Hanyu features were visible. Sometimes he forgot to hide them and the older villagers would make signs to ward off demons when he walked by. It didn't help that a bear yokai had broken into the village in an attempt to kill Naruto, claiming the boy was an abomination and should be destroyed, only to get torn apart by Kyuubi in her fox form. The incident had alerted many of the villagers to the dangers of having Naruto walking around, but most of them liked Naruto and wouldn't want to see him driven away. The few that didn't like Naruto were the victims of his pranks or had a grievance against his father from a past encounter. Konohamaru, I can only give you some advice. Train hard and never give up and someday you'll earn the respect you deserve. Now why do you think my no jutsu will allow you to defeat Old Four Eyes? Said Naruto. Konohamaru's grin returned and it was different than before. This was the grin of someone who was about to call in poker and knew they had the winning hand. I saw him disguised in a trench coat coming out of the store that sells dirty books when I was playing hide and seek with some of the other kids. He was also blushing and looking around to make sure no one saw him, said the little boy. Naruto laughed and said, Great, I think you're ready to face him. After that, keep training and when you're ready to attempt to claim the Hokage name you can challenge me for it. Konohamaru grinned and the two boys clinked their soda cans together as a toast to seal the deal while Gisho wagged his tails. Gishu's tail suddenly stiffened and he growled, alerting Naruto and Konohamaru that they weren't alone anymore. Ken stood on the roof of the Hokage tower with Sarutobi, looking up at the monument that bore their faces. Both men turned as the light sound of a person landing on the roof reached their trained ears. "Ah Iruka, how are you feeling?" asked Sarutobi as he smiled at the Chunin. "Fine sir, Kyuubi-sama had me patched up in no time. I still find it hard to believe Mizuki would betray the village and try to use Naruto to steal the scroll of forbidden seals," said Iruka. Ken sighed and said, "Kyuubi has told me that Hanyu children are often tormented because humans and yokai alike view them as abominations. Because of all that Kyuubi has done for this village and the fact that many people got to know her in her kitsune form, Naruto doesn't face the prejudice of most of the villagers. However, he still feels the need to be accepted for himself instead of being our son." Thus Mizuki was able to trick him into taking the scroll instead of offering to just let him pass and appealing to Naruto's sense of honor. Naruto actually did a good job, managing a hench to fool the guards and hide the scroll. The only reason I knew he had the scroll was because Sasuke and Hinata came looking for him and he left a note saying he would return it soon. Sarutobi and Iruka both laughed at the thought of a shinobi leaving a note promising to return something they stole and all three men went inside Ken's office to discuss the arrangement of the genin teams. "I've finally found you," said Ebisu from his perch on a tree branch above Naruto and Konohamaru's seat. The tutor glared at Naruto, reminded of the humiliation the boy had put him through in front of his father and mother, before leaping to the ground and saying, "Young master, let's go home now." Konohamaru glared at Ebisu and yelled, "No. I'll defeat you and prove I'm worthy of being called Konohamaru instead of honored grandson and all that crap." Ebisu gasped at his student's language and said, "This little brat has been a bad influence on you, young master." Only to be cut off by Konohamaru yelling, "Behold," as a cloud of smoke surrounded the boy. The smoke cleared to reveal a beautiful brown-haired girl with her hands behind her head and wisps of smoke covering her most private parts. "Take this, no jutsu," cooed the transformed Konohamaru. Ebisu's jaw dropped and Konohamaru dropped the transformation in surprise. "What? Why didn't it work?" he demanded. Ebisu started shrieking, "What a vulgar skill. I am a gentleman. Such a super low-class skill will never work against me." Ebisu failed to notice that Naruto's face had darkened as his, in his mind at least, greatest creation was ridiculed. "Young master, if you hang out with the likes of him you'll just turn stupid. Just do what I say. I am your easiest shortcut to gaining the respect you deserve as a future Hokage," growled Ebisu as he grabbed Konohamaru's scarf and tried to pull him out of the clearing while the little boy yelled, "No!" and tried to fight the man's strength. A yell of, "Kage Bushin no Jutsu!" grabbed the attention of tutor and pupil and they looked up to see a large group of Naruto standing opposite them. Ebisu dropped Konohamaru's scarf and assumed a combat stance. "Hey, how foolish, I am an elite tutor. I'm not so easily fooled like that idiot Mizuki. Oh yeah, well feast your eyes on this. Behold!" yelled all the Naruto clones. All the clones suddenly performed no jutsu and rushed Ebisu, rubbing themselves against him and grabbing him all over his body. The tutor stared wide-eyed, while Konohamaru found his view obscured by Gisho covering his eyes. Ebisu stared for another second and then went flying as two huge gushers of blood shot out of his nose. Unknown to the four in the clearing, Ken had decided to check on the boys and was watching the whole thing with Sarutobi in his crystal ball. The former Hokage had a pale face and jerked his eyes away from the scene in the orb, while Ken stared wide-eyed. "I was right, the real jutsu is nude," groaned Ken before he covered his eyes. "Now I have to give Naruto the talk a lot earlier than I thought," sighed Ken to himself. Back in the clearing, all of the clone girls vanished. The one was seen kicking Ebisu in the head to make sure he stayed out before she disappeared with a huge smirk on her face, and Naruto reverted to normal and winked at Konohamaru. "I call that one harem no jutsu," said Naruto proudly. The adults watching through the crystal ball were impressed with Naruto's skill at using his Kage Bushin no jutsu. "He combined the Kage Bushin and the no jutsu," said Ken with a smirk as he passed Sarutobi a Kleenex to clean the slight trickle of blood coming from his nose. The former Hokage nodded, secretly glad he had gotten the chance to witness such an interesting technique. "Damn it, I couldn't even defeat my own tutor," yelled Konohamaru as he punched the ground in anger. Naruto sighed and settled down to lecture the boy a little while Gisho curled up at their feet. Ebisu was currently hanging from a tree upside down, clad in nothing but his underwear, with a sign saying, "Village Idiot," taped to his chest and a gag made from his shirt stuffed in his mouth to keep him quiet. "You just have to be patient and work hard, Konohamaru. If you rush into everything you'll never beat this closet pervert and certainly never beat me. Ask your grandpa to teach you some simple jutsu. He's called the professor because he knows how to use so many jutsu. Don't listen to Ebisu, there are no shortcuts in life. You have to work hard and someday you'll have the respect you want. Now come on, I think I could use some ice cream," said Naruto with a smile. Konohamaru grinned and jumped up with a smile as Gisho climbed up Naruto to perch in the blonde's hair. The trio left the clearing, ignoring Ebisu's muffled demands to be set free. "Hi Hinata-chan," yelled Naruto as he entered the ice cream parlor with Konohamaru to find Hinata enjoying a sundae with her little sister Hanabi while Neji happily ate a huge banana split. Naruto ordered a scoop of strawberries and cream with a scoop of marble black raspberry for himself, while Konohamaru got 2 scoops of brownies a la mode. Hanabi had a blush on her cheeks as Konohamaru and Naruto joined the Hyuga members in the booth. Naruto, Hinata, and Neji all smiled as they saw the way Hanabi tried to look at Konohamaru without giving herself away and failed miserably. Konohamaru was totally oblivious to Hanabi's stare and focused all his attention on his ice cream. Gisho was perched on Naruto's head chewing on a piece of the jerky Naruto always carried in his supply pouch for his pet's consumption. "How do you think the teams will be arranged, Hinata?" asked Naruto. Hinata tilted her head back for a minute and pictured the people who had passed the graduation exam. "I don't know for sure, Naruto-kun, but I think Ino-chan, Shikamaru, and Choji will be together. Their families have a history of working together well and they have all known each other since they were able to walk." Naruto nodded. His father had told him stories about the famous Ino, Shika, Cho teams to show him the value of teamwork at a young age. "Hey, maybe that means you, Sasuke, and I will be on the same team, Hinata-chan," said Naruto with a grin. Hinata giggled. Naruto currently had a bit of ice cream on the tip of his nose. Hinata reached across the table and dabbed Naruto's nose with a napkin, causing the blonde to blush slightly. Neji grinned. He had watched them playing together as small children and knew how fond they were of each other. Naruto turned to watch Konohamaru clutch his head in pain. "Ice cream headache?" asked the Hanyu with a grin. His only answer was a moan as Konohamaru rested his head in his arms on the table. Hanabi giggled slightly as Konohamaru groaned, "The pain, just let me die in peace," before resuming the consumption of his ice cream. Hinata passed Konohamaru an aspirin from her pouch of medical supplies, an item she had always carried after figuring out how often Naruto hurt himself when they were playing and didn't do anything to treat his wounds. Of course, since he was a Hanyu, they healed quickly and he didn't get sick easily, but Hinata knew that at some point Naruto would find himself out of chakra and unable to heal for a while and requiring medical attention. "Thanks Hinata-ne-san," said Konohamaru as he swallowed the pill with a bite of ice cream. Konohamaru had been babysat by Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata a few times so the older kids could earn some extra pocket money, and Konohamaru repaid their kindness by treating them like older siblings. After that, everyone enjoyed their ice cream and talked about little things. When everyone was finished, Naruto walked Konohamaru to his house while Neji led his cousins back to the Hyuga mansion. Naruto and Hinata agreed to arrive at the academy early the next day to spend some time with their friends before they were all separated into different teams. After dropping Konohamaru off at his house, Naruto jogged towards his house with Gisho at his heels. The sounds of flesh hitting wood from the backyard reached the pair's ears and they entered the backyard to find Sasuke pummeling a wooden training dummy. "Hey Sasuke, you want to spar?" asked Naruto as Sasuke stopped beating up the defenseless dummy and turned to look at his brother while wiping the sweat from his forehead. Sasuke nodded and the two boys settled into their preferred taijutsu stances. Sasuke was using a stance that allowed him to attack and defend easily, while Naruto was leaned back slightly on his back leg and held his hands in front of his body so he could use his claws to his advantage. Naruto's ears and tails twitched slightly as he stared at Sasuke. Both boys were waiting for a certain leaf to hit the ground between them. As soon as it hit the ground, Naruto turned into a blonde and orange blur as he charged at Sasuke. The two boys met in mid-air and delivered a series of punches and kicks that were either blocked or dodged. They then broke apart and landed on the ground. "Not bad Sasuke, now it's time to kick it up a notch," said Naruto as blue fire surrounded his hands and feet. Sasuke grinned and pulled out several kunai and shuriken. The Uchiha boy then used his incredible skill with the projectile weapons to send a bunch of kunai at Naruto while shuriken homed in on the Hanyu from above and below. Naruto narrowed his eyes and back-flipped away from the projectiles to grab a tree branch and use it to soar into the air above Sasuke. Flames appeared around Naruto's right foot as he brought it down at Sasuke's head. Sasuke crossed his arms and blocked the blow before shifting his arms in an attempt to grab Naruto's leg as the flames faded. Naruto's tails shot around his body and wrapped themselves around Sasuke's arms as he attempted to throw Naruto. Sasuke was the one sent sailing through the air and he barely managed to land safely. "Boys, that is enough, it is time for dinner," said Kyuubi from the back door of the house. Naruto and Sasuke stopped their sparring and went inside. Kyuubi had returned to the kitchen and was preparing orange chicken for dinner to celebrate the boys' graduation. She had originally planned the celebratory dinner for the previous evening, but Iruka's offer for ramen had taken priority since he had wanted to celebrate Mizuki's defeat at Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke's hands. Ken sighed as he hung his Hokage robes up in the closet. Arranging the genin teams had been a hassle and he was glad to have that ordeal behind him. The sounds from downstairs told him that Naruto was setting the table with Sasuke while Kyuubi finished preparing dinner. Ken smiled, it wasn't often that he was able to get out early enough for a relaxing dinner with his family like this. Often, Ken found himself working late or Kyuubi had an emergency to deal with that prevented them from being home for dinner. Luckily, Naruto and Sasuke could prepare some basic foods for themselves so they wouldn't have to worry about going hungry. Ken made sure he had the 2 large boxes that had been delivered to his office earlier that day and headed downstairs for the celebration dinner. "Oh, that was great. Excellent dinner Oka-san," said Naruto as he rubbed his belly in contentment. Gisho yipped his agreement, while Sasuke made a grunt of approval. "Come on Sasuke, is that all you have to say?" asked Kyuubi. Sasuke stared at the kitsune woman for a minute before actually smiling and taking a sip of water to clear his throat. "It was a good meal, one of your best yet Oka-san," said the Uchiha boy. Naruto was joking about how he missed the chance to capture the rare and elusive Sasuke's smile on film and become the most famous photographer of all time. Sasuke promptly tossed what was left of his glass of water in Naruto's face and told him to shut up. Naruto countered by poking Sasuke with one of his chopsticks. Sasuke grabbed the other chopstick and the two boys were soon engaged in a fencing match with their chopsticks while Kyuubi was breathless with laughter. Ken grinned at the boys' antics and reached down to pick up the packages he had brought downstairs. "Okay boys, I've got some special surprises for you too since you passed the graduation exam. So to celebrate your graduation, your mother and I got you these special gifts," said Ken with a smile. Naruto and Sasuke instantly stopped their fight and grabbed the package Ken handed to each of them. The boys eagerly ripped open the wrapping paper and gasped at what they found inside. Kyuubi grinned at the looks on the boys' faces and said, "These Hite-8 plates are made from one of my fangs and will allow any kitsune to track you down in an emergency. The cloth is woven from some of my hair and is fireproof, making it very useful since you both like to play with flames." Naruto and Sasuke both looked down at the ground, remembering the time they made a huge burn on the front lawn when practicing with Foxfire and Acknowledgment jutsu together. Ken cleared his throat before saying, "Each of you gets a special set of weapons that I believe is best suited to your particular fighting style made from another of your mother's fangs. Sasuke, you have 3 Fuma Shuriken that are capable of being set on fire by a drop of your blood on the kanji for fire you see on all the blades. Simply slit your finger on one of the blades and put the blood on one of the marks before saying Tenka, ignition. I know you've been training with that Fuma Shuriken I have in the dojo, so now you have some of your own. Naruto, you have this katana. You have grasped the basics of swordsmanship from me, and I think it is time for you to have your own sword. Never let the sword out of your possession. Both of your gifts are designed to seal your kitsune blood and prevent it from taking control of you like it almost did yesterday. If your kitsune blood takes control of you, you might end up killing your friends by accident because your instincts will overpower your mind and cause you to attack anything you perceive as a threat." Naruto's face paled and he gripped the sheathed katana like it was his only hold on reality. Seeing Naruto's face so pale, Sasuke chuckled and said, "As if you could hurt me or Hinata Dobi. I saw her calm you down yesterday with a hug and a kiss. Your instincts recognized her as your future mate, even though you two aren't at that stage yet, and allowed you to relax and regain control of your mind." Kyuubi nodded to confirm what Sasuke said. "He's right, son, by nature we kitsune won't harm those we recognize as loved ones when we're out for blood, which can be a problem. If Hinata is ever a hostage, your instincts will be screaming to go after her, and that might cost her life. Starting tomorrow I'll send one of my foxes to keep watch on you at all times and step in if your instincts get out of control," said the kitsune woman as she kissed Naruto's head. Naruto relaxed slightly, though he didn't let go of his new sword. That night, Kyuubi eased open the door to Naruto's room to catch a glimpse of her son. Naruto was snoring gently while he clutched a large stuffed frog his father had given him for his birthday several years ago. Naruto suddenly started twitching in his sleep, troubled by an unpleasant dream. Kyuubi smiled and carefully walked over to give Naruto a kiss on his forehead. The Hanyu boy sighed and settled down, easing back into the world of happy dreams. Kyuubi tucked Naruto in snugly and softly closed the door to his room. The kitsune woman's next stop was Sasuke's room, where she saw him hugging his pillow and moaning, "Fangirls! Save me from the fangirls. No, don't cut off locks of my hair. Let go of me, I don't want to go on a date with you. Get your hands out of my pants." Kyuubi stared at Sasuke in shock before darting to his side and gently shaking him awake. Sasuke sat up in shock, cold sweat covering his forehead as he panted from the fear of his nightmare. "Relax, Sasuke, it was just a bad dream," said Kyuubi as she placed a hand on his forehead. Sasuke took several deep breaths to calm himself and suddenly hugged Kyuubi tightly and shuddered from the horror he had been forced to endure and the feeling of violation that clung to him. Kyuubi's tails and arms embraced Sasuke and he collapsed into her grasp with a sigh of relief. "My poor boy, even in your sleep your fangirls chase you. Lay down and I'll sing you a song to drive away the nightmares." Sasuke did as he was told and listened as Kyuubi sang to him. Little by little Sasuke fell asleep again and Kyuubi tucked him in and kissed his cheek. "Oka-san," muttered Sasuke softly, causing Kyuubi to smile. It wasn't often that Sasuke called her that, since he felt it was disrespectful to his dead mother, but he knew she loved him just as much as she loved Naruto. Kyuubi closed the door and walked to the room she shared with Ken. Her husband was waiting on the bed, clad only in boxers with the Uzumaki spiral covering them. Ken glanced up from the book, Giving Your Child the Talk, which he was reading in preparation of explaining the birds and the bees to Naruto and Sasuke since they would be having a female teammate the next day and should know the facts of life. "Boys asleep?" asked Ken as Kyuubi opened her sleeping robe to reveal a simple nightgown before climbing into the bed with him. Kyuubi nodded as she snuggled up against Ken, who marked his place in the book before setting it on his bedside table and turning off his reading light. Now free of distractions, Kyuubi kissed her husband on the lips hard, her tails and arms wrapping around him as his hands rubbed her back. One thing led to another and the moon eventually saw the two most powerful people in the village curled up in each other's arms contentedly. The sun dawned on Konoha the next day without a cloud in the sky. A beam of sunlight slipped through the blinds of Naruto's room and hit him in the eye. Naruto whined, not wanting to get up, and buried his head under his pillow. Thus the scene that Kyuubi saw when she opened the door to her son's room was a giant lump in the middle of the bed and a blonde tail sticking out from beneath the covers. Gisho was curled up in the sunbeam on top of the lump and gave a sleepy yip to greet Kyuubi. A low snore from beneath the covers signaled that Naruto was in need of awakening. Kyuubi grinned and shifted into her fox form, though keeping herself at the size of a large dog, and darted under the covers to lick her son's face. Naruto started giggling and finally opened his eyes to see his mother's fox face staring at him. "Morning, Oka-san," said Naruto as he blinked the sand from his eyes. Kyuubi grinned and hopped off the bed to resume her human form and opened the blinds covering the window. Naruto managed to stumble out of his bed and make it to the bathroom for his morning shower and grooming. Sasuke had apparently beaten Naruto to the shower since his towel and toothbrush were wet. Naruto quickly showered and groomed himself before running to the stairs. Opting to take the fast route down, Naruto slid down the banister to the bottom floor with Gisho on his back. Unfortunately, Naruto crashed right into his father as he came in the door from getting the daily Konoha newspaper. Father and son ended up in a pile on the floor of the front hall of the house. Ken sighed as he stared at his son, who was doing a handstand on his stomach. "Naruto, what have we told you about sliding down the banisters?" growled Ken, doing a remarkable imitation of an angry yokai. Naruto gulped and rolled so he was sitting on his father's chest. Not to do it," guessed Naruto as he put on his most innocent smile. Ken smirked and grabbed his son by the tails as he stood up and raised Naruto so they were eye to eye. "Then why did you slide down the banister this morning?" asked Ken. His tone was pleasant, but Naruto could see the anger at his disregard for safety shining clearly. Naruto gulped and said, "I was anxious to get to the academy with Sasuke so we can find out our genin teams. Koibito, we can forgive him this once. Sasuke is already in here waiting for breakfast and Naruto must be hungry," called Kyuubi from the kitchen as she placed a plate of pancakes in front of Ken's seat. Sasuke was patiently sitting at the table and staring at his omelet, waiting to devour the morsel and dash out the door to the academy. The Hite 8 that he had received the previous evening rested proudly on his forehead, and Naruto had to check to make sure he had remembered to put his on instead of his goggles, which he had. Naruto wiggled out of his father's grip and ran into the kitchen to breathe in the aroma of his pancakes and omelet. Gisho was already eating his breakfast from the bowl Kyuubi placed on the floor for him, not having to put up with the silly human custom of manners. Naruto sighed. He was half tempted to use henge to become a fox and scarf his meal before running to the academy, but he knew his mom would kill him if he did that. Finally, everyone was seated and the meal began. Ken and Kyuubi watched with smiles on their faces as Sasuke and Naruto ate as fast as they could without choking, eager to get to the academy. No sooner had the two boys finished than their dishes were in the sink and two blurs had zipped upstairs to brush their teeth before coming downstairs to kiss their mother goodbye and let their father ruffle their hair before they ran off towards the academy with Gisho chasing after them, yelling for Naruto to stop and pick him up. Naruto grinned as he watched his fellow graduates gather in groups to talk from his seat next to Hinata. Sasuke was in "enter my personal space and die" mode, so the couple had put themselves in between Sasuke and any fangirls that would lose their lives by trying to talk to Sasuke. Kiba walked over with Akamaru in his jacket and raised an eyebrow as his gaze fell on Naruto. "Huh? Naruto, what the hell are you doing here? I heard a rumor that you failed the exam," said Kiba, not wanting to lose his friend and sparring partner. Naruto grinned and pointed to his Hite 8. "Does it look like I failed? I just had a bit of an imbalance in my chakra system that Oka-san fixed, so I passed the test later," said Naruto, not wanting to reveal he had mastered a Junin-level jutsu in a few hours. Kiba grinned and gave Naruto a high five, while Gisho and Akamaru had both hopped to the floor and were conversing in growls, barks, and yips. Naruto looked around and saw all his friends had passed the exam, not that he doubted them. A sudden growl beside Kiba was all the warning anyone had before Kiba and Akamaru started wrestling. The two pets were quickly concealed by a cloud of dust and slammed into Naruto's chair as he turned to look at them. The fox boy fell towards Hinata and his head landed in her lap. The sudden impact caused Naruto's fox features to appear. Hinata blushed and reached down to pet Naruto's fox ears. I could get to like this, said Naruto with a grin, not minding all the stares he was getting. Sure, people knew his mother was a kitsune, but seeing fox ears and tails suddenly appear on him had driven that fact home for many of the kids. Behind everyone's backs, Akamaru and Gisho smacked paws to congratulate each other on successfully getting Naruto into his current position. Iruka cleared his throat loudly to turn the class's attention from Naruto and Hinata onto himself. Beginning today you are all real ninjas, but you are still merely rookie genin. The hard part has just started. Now you will soon be assigned duties by the village. So today, we will be creating 3-man teams and each team will have a Junin sensei. You will follow that sensei's instructions as you complete the assigned duties, said the Chunin. Instantly, all the girls but Hinata fixed their eyes on Sasuke and thought, I have to be with Sasuke-kun. Sasuke shuddered, not daring to open his eyes and see the lustful look aimed at him. Kami-sama, please put me with Naruto and Hinata and not 2 rabid fangirls like Sakura and Ino. Heck, I'd even settle for being stuck with 2 gay guys. Sasuke ranted inside his head. Iruka's next words calmed Sasuke down a little, though. We tried to balance each team's strength, said Iruka as he held up a clipboard and ignored the loud yell of, what? That all the students uttered. Naruto listened with half an ear, only giving Iruka his full attention when the teacher said, next, Team 7. Hyuga Hinata, Uzumaki Naruto. Here Iruka was interrupted by a loud squeal of happiness from Hinata, who immediately hugged Naruto's tails in delight while Naruto glanced around the room to make sure none of the other boys had looks of disappointment, since Hinata was one of the most popular girls in the class. Iruka smiled inside his head as he announced the last member of Team 7, and Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto and Sasuke grinned at each other and leaned back in their seats with huge foxy grins on their faces. All the girls in the class had slumped down on their desks in disappointment at not being with the class heartthrob. Iruka sighed and grinned as he saw the next team. Team 8, Inuzuka Kiba and Akamaru, Aburame Shino, and Haruno Sakura, said Iruka. Kiba gave a small howl of woe that he was with one of the loudest girls in the class. Sakura on the other hand moaned as she felt a headache coming on. Naruto didn't care about the next team, but the next one caught his attention. Iruka raised his voice a little to be heard above Sakura's moans and said, Team 10, Akamichi Choji, Narashikamaru, Yamanaka Ino. Choji just stuffed chips into his mouth with more speed, happy to have his lazy friend on the same team. Shikamaru groaned and stared out the window as he sighed, troublesome. Iruka finished announcing the teams and looked around the classroom. He already had a pretty good idea which of the groups would pass the Genin exam that their Junin instructor would give them. Okay, this afternoon we'll introduce the Junin senseis. Take a break until then, said Iruka with a smile. Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke were all perched on the branch of the tree outside the academy eating their lunch. Naruto had a thermos next to him holding hot water for his ramen while Hinata enjoyed a sushi bento and Sasuke munched on a batch of onigiri Kyuubi had made the previous day. Gisho was enjoying his can of ground hamburger between Naruto and Hinata while Naruto was enjoying the way Hinata was petting his tails as she ate and Sasuke could hear a low purr coming from his brother. Hey Dobi, since when do foxes purr? Asked Sasuke. Naruto stopped purring and glared at Sasuke. It isn't purring, it is happy growling, exclaimed Naruto. Sasuke smirked, but before he could offer a retort, his danger sense started tingling. Sasuke looked at the ground and sure enough, there were Sakura and Ino. Sasuke-kun, I made this bento for you. You must be hungry after just having those onigiri, exclaimed both the girls at the same time as they each held up a wrapped bento box. Both of the girls then glared at their rival for Sasuke's heart and made Hinata glad she didn't have a rival. When both girls looked up to see if Sasuke was prepared to accept their bento and love, they found a sign saying, "Leave me alone," where Sasuke had been sitting while Naruto and Hinata struggled to contain their laughter at Sasuke's blunt denial of the girls beneath them. I'm so glad I don't have to worry about anyone stealing my Naruto-kun, said Hinata with a smile as she hugged Naruto's tails. Sakura and Ino looked jealous at the love the two shared and ran off to look for Sasuke. As soon as they were gone, the sign disappeared with a poof on smoke and became Sasuke. Idiots, they were looking right at you and didn't realize it," said Naruto with a chuckle as he lightly punched Sasuke on the shoulder. A bell rang, indicating the lunch break was over and the new genin trooped back into the classroom for the assignment of their Junin sensei. Naruto, Gisho, Sasuke, and Hinata sat waiting as all the other team's senseis entered the room and left with their team. A pretty female Junin named Kurenai led Kiba, Akamaru, Shino, and Sakura away while the chain smoker Asuma took Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino to a Korean barbecue place. Finally, Iruka and Team 7 were the only ones left in the room. "Where the hell is our instructor?" yelled Naruto. It had been 3 hours since lunch and the blonde was bored. "Maybe they were on a mission and just got back and had to speak with your father," suggested Hinata. Naruto scowled and was about to make some rude comment about party teachers when he froze. "Sasuke, could our Junin sensei possibly be him? No one else I know is this late," asked the blonde. Sasuke looked surprised for a minute, but then his eyes narrowed and he nodded. "It makes sense, father was his Junin sensei and he has a Sharingan surgically placed in his left eye so he could teach me how to use mine when I finally activate it." Hinata was confused. Obviously her teammates knew or guessed who their instructor was and were familiar with him. "Anyo, but who are you talking about?" she asked. Naruto sighed and said, "Our sensei is most likely Hitaki Kakashi. He's one of Konoha's most famous Junin, known throughout the 5 shinobi countries as Sharingan Kakashi the Copy Ninja. He's supposedly copied over 1,000 jutsu, hence the name Copy Ninja. But he's also a pervert. He reads this dirty book series called Icha Icha Paradise in public and is always giggling as he reads it." While Naruto was speaking, he had started digging through his supply pouch and pulled out a small scroll. Sasuke groaned and said, "Dobi, do you really think that stupid prank scroll you made will work on Kakashi?" Naruto just grinned as he used a chair to place the scroll at the top of the sliding doors so it couldn't be seen, but when the doors were opened the scroll would be torn apart. "What is that scroll for, Naruto-kun?" asked Hinata. Naruto rubbed the side of his nose and smirked. "You'll see, Hinata-chan, that's what he gets for being late," said the blonde as he jumped down from the chair and sat down beside Hinata and wrapped his tails around her, using the ends to tickle her. Hinata giggled and scratched Naruto's ears as he hugged her. The sound of footsteps outside the door alerted the room's occupants that someone was coming towards the room. All 3 genin stopped talking and grabbed a kunai in case this was some kind of test of their reflexes. The door opened and Naruto's scroll ripped, releasing a small waterfall that soaked the silver-haired Junin standing in the doorway. The Junin looked up at the top of the doors, only to find there was nothing there since the scroll had disappeared back into Naruto's pouch. "Okay, how did you do that, Naruto?" asked the Junin as he fixed his single eye on the Hanyu. Naruto grinned and said, "I used a special scroll tag that has a bunch of water sealed inside it. When the scroll is ripped it releases the water and returns to my pouch." Kakashi nodded. He had seen Kyuubi use similar scrolls to amuse the children in the hospital. Only those held small stuffed animals or candy for the little kids. Kakashi could easily see the skill being used to carry an emergency supply of fresh water. "Well, given that I had no clue that was going to happen, I'd say you got me good," said Kakashi as his visible eye became an upside-down U and a faint crinkle in his face mask were the only indications that he was smiling. "It looks like you 3 will be an interesting team. Meet me on the rooftop in 5 minutes. After he finished speaking, Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto shrugged and led his teammates to the roof. Kakashi stared at his 3 charges. Sasuke was leaning against a tree while Naruto had Hinata in his tail's embrace again and Gisho perched on his head. "Okay, I already know Naruto and Sasuke, but we'll all introduce ourselves," said the Junin. "Anyo, what do you mean Kakashi-sensei?" asked Hinata. Kakashi shrugged and closed his eye as he said, "How about your likes, dislikes, dreams for the future, hobbies, stuff like that?" "I'll go first. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I have no desire to tell you my likes or dislikes. Dreams for the future? Well, I have lots of hobbies." Hinata stared at Kakashi as if expecting more. "All I learned was his name," she thought. "Chigao." "Just a moment. Kakashi-sensei, you forgot to mention you like reading dirty books. Hate having people try to see what is under you mask. Your goal in life is to memorize the entire Icha Icha Paradise series. And your hobbies are being late for everything that isn't a mission or a life or death matter, said Naruto with a grin. Kakashi's visible eyes snapped open and he glared at Naruto. Me next, yelled the blonde, not even flinching at the look Kakashi was sending his way. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like Hinata-chan, my parents, playing tricks on people, and ramen. I hate the 3-minute wait for ramen to cook, people who just view me as the Hokage's son or a Hanyu instead of for who I am, and people who try to hurt my friends. My dreams are to marry Hinata-chan, when we are old enough, and surpass my father and the previous Hokage and become the Godem, or Rokudame if dad retires before I'm old enough to take over and appoints a successor and make all the villagers recognize me for my accomplishments instead of my family name. My hobbies are cuddling with Hinata-chan, playing pranks, and training. Kakashi smiled. He had been like an uncle to Naruto and had watched him in the past when Ken and Kyuubi wanted a night alone, so he knew most of the stuff that Naruto said already. He didn't know how close Naruto and Hinata were though, and was slightly worried that they might distract each other during the mission. Very good, next, said Kakashi as he looked at Hinata. The Hyuga girl smiled and said, my name is Hyuga Hinata. I like making medical creams, training with my cousin Neji, and Naruto-kun. I hate Kumo Shinobi, the Hyuga curse seal, and people who are mean to others for no reason. My dreams are to marry Naruto-kun and become the Hyuga clan head. My hobbies are making medical creams, spending time with my little sister, and reading. Kakashi smiled. Hinata was not what he had expected. He had been expecting a girl who cared more about her looks than being a kunoichi, and Hinata was the opposite. Her dedication to her family and Naruto were good signs. They ensured she wouldn't abandon a team member during a mission. Kakashi glanced at Sasuke, who sighed and said, my name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like living with my foster family the Uzumakis, Onigiri, Kaden Jutsu, and training. I hate fangirls and my bastard of a brother Itachi. My hobbies are training with Naruto and our father, and my dream, no, my ambition is to kill Itachi and resurrect the Uchiha clan. Kakashi stared at Sasuke for a minute and sighed. I knew it, he is after all an Avenger. I'll have to keep an eye on him, thought Kakashi before he said, okay, that's enough. Starting tomorrow we'll begin our duties. What kind of duties? Do we have to kick some bandit ass, hunt down wolves, or maybe rescue a hostage? Demanded Naruto. Kakashi chuckled and said, first we are going to do a little exercise with just the 4 of us. Seeing the eager look on Naruto's face, Kakashi continued, before you ask, it's survival training. Why are we doing survival training? We've done that in the academy, asked Sasuke. I'm your opponent, but this isn't normal survival training, said Kakashi before he started to chuckle. What's so funny, Kakashi no hentai? Demanded Naruto, who promptly got smacked on the head by Kakashi. It's just that when I tell you guys this, you're going to freak out, said Kakashi as his eyes showed he was smiling. Freak out? Asked Hinata, not feeling very confident. Kakashi's face lost all traces of happiness as he said, of the 27 graduates, only 9 will be chosen as genin. The rest will be sent back to the academy. This training is a super difficult exam with a failure rate of over 66%. Naruto's yell of, "Nani?" could be heard throughout the village for several minutes. What the hell? But we worked so hard. We could have been killed by that traitor when he fooled me and almost got the scroll if we didn't work together to beat him. What was the point of graduating? Yelled Naruto. Kakashi grinned and said, oh that's just to select those that have the ability to become genin. Anyway, tomorrow you'll be graded on the training field. Bring all your shinobi tools. Oh, and don't eat breakfast, you'll throw up. The details can be found on this printout. Don't be late tomorrow. With that, Kakashi disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata all shared looks of fear and outrage as they left to go eat at Ichiraku for what might be their last meal as a team. The next morning found Team 7 enjoying a picnic breakfast in training ground number 3 while they waited for their sensei. Naruto had brought a large basket containing eggs, bacon, and sausage to eat with several thermoses of hot chocolate. Anyo, are you sure we should be eating? Asked Hinata as she accepted a cup of hot chocolate from Naruto. Kakashi is always late, so he'll be here around lunchtime. We need all the strength we can get, and I'm not sitting around doing nothing and letting you guys sabotage your chance at passing this exam, said Naruto as Sasuke tossed a sausage to Gisho. Besides, we have to enjoy every minute we have together as a team if the exam is as tough as Kakashi no Hentai says. Across Konoha, Kakashi woke up with a sneeze. Someone must be gossiping about me, he said before glancing to the side and seeing he still had 2 hours before his alarm rang. Kakashi promptly lay down and went back to sleep. 2 hours later, Kakashi walked into the training grounds. "Hey guys, good morning," he exclaimed. 100 Naruto Kage Bushins appeared and yelled, "You're late." Kakashi looked around and noticed Sasuke and Hinata glaring at him also. All the Bushins disappeared and left the original Naruto standing with Sasuke and Hinata with Gisho on his head. Kakashi grinned and placed an alarm clock on a stump and turned to face his students. "Here are 2 bells. Your task is to take these from me before noon. Those who cannot get a bell by noon get no lunch." Kakashi then pointed to 3 large stumps. "I'll not only tie you to one of those stumps but I'll eat my lunch right in front of you." Kakashi then noticed that none of his subordinates looked upset by this development. Kakashi cleared his throat before continuing, "You only need to get 1 bell. There are only 2, so one of you will definitely be tied to a stump. And the person who doesn't take a bell fails. So at least one of you will be sent back to the academy. You can even use your shurikens and kunai. You won't win unless you come at me with killing intent." At this part, Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke all grinned widely. This made Kakashi slightly worried. Seeing that his students had no objections, Kakashi grinned and said, "Start." All 4 shinobi disappeared, though Hinata, Sasuke, and Naruto all met up almost immediately. All 3 friends nodded and darted silently through the forest, with Naruto and Gisho in the front of a triangle formation. Kakashi glanced up from his book as Naruto leapt out of the bushes and pointed at him with righteous indignation. "Kakashi no Hentai, Oka-san will kill you if I tell her you're our sensei and you're reading your dirty book in front of us," said Naruto with a grin. Kakashi waved his hand and said, "Mane, there is no need to be rude, Naruto. Is that any way to talk to your teacher? And I think you missed the point of the exercise, you're supposed to." Naruto interrupted Kakashi by yelling, "Kick your ass," and charging at the Junin. Kakashi sighed and blocked Naruto's first punch before crouching down to avoid the blonde's follow-up kick. Naruto charged forward to punch Kakashi, only to stare in shock as his teacher disappeared right in front of him. "Huh?" asked the blonde, even though his nose and ears told him Kakashi was behind him. Hiding in the bushes, Sasuke winced in anticipation as he took in Kakashi's crouched stance and the tiger seal he was forming around his book. Naruto was right, Dad did teach Kakashi that move. "I'm glad Naruto volunteered to be the decoy and not me," thought Sasuke. Kakashi had an evil glint in his eye before lunging forward as he yelled, "Hidden Leaf Ancient Supreme Taijutsu Technique. 1,000 years of pain," and jabbed the points of his fingers up Naruto's ass. Naruto rocketed up into the air screaming in pain, only to disappear with a pop. "Kage Bushin," thought Kakashi, Sasuke, and Hinata, surprised they hadn't seen Naruto make clones at any time. Hinata had her Byakugan active and her mouth dropped open as she saw Naruto appear above Kakashi with his new katana drawn. The sword blade had flames etched along the edge and the Uzumaki spiral near the hilt. Naruto brought the katana down on Kakashi's head, only to watch the silver-haired Junin disappear again. Kakashi suddenly appeared standing on the water of the nearby lake, causing Naruto to grin. "Hey Kakashi-sensei, let me show you a trick," yelled Naruto as he shifted into a weird stance where he held his sword above his head while pointing it at the ground. Blue flames suddenly covered the sword, causing Kakashi's eye to widen. Naruto yelled, "Kanjiri, flame slash," as he swung the sword down and in front of himself and sent a crescent of blue fire towards Kakashi. Kakashi's visible eye widened in surprise as the attack hit him. Kakashi suddenly disappeared in a puff of smoke and left a log that was sliced in half in his place that fell into the water and extinguished the flames covering it. Kakashi reappeared beside Naruto and whistled in surprise as the attack kept going and cut down a tree on the lake's edge before disappearing. "What was that?" asked the Junin. Naruto grinned as he sheathed his katana and said, "I channeled my foxfire into the sword blade and shot it out as I slashed. Dad taught me how to do that with a chakra wave, I just adapted it to use foxfire instead." Kakashi nodded and pulled his book from the pouch on his back as he prepared to engage Naruto in taijutsu again. Just then, a red blur shot out of the bushes and grabbed Kakashi's book and ran across his back. Gisho leapt off the Junin and ran across the clearing and back into the woods. Kakashi leapt away from Naruto, planning to catch the fox, only to hear, Kaden Gukaku no Jutsu, and see a huge fireball rushing towards him. Kakashi made several hand seals and yelled, Sweden, Tatsumaki, water style, waterspout, and slammed his hands into the ground. A waterspout shot up in front of Kakashi and clashed with Sasuke's fireball, but Kakashi had to keep his hands on the ground to keep the water coming. Sasuke's jutsu stopped abruptly and Kakashi stared for a second in surprise before he stopped his counterattack and leapt away from his position. Kakashi found himself in the middle of the clearing with none of his students in sight. Hey, they either planned this all out beforehand or they have natural teamwork. I know Naruto is somewhere around here using henge. Sasuke has probably moved from where he attacked me, and I have no clue about Hinata. They might actually get the bells, thought Kakashi. Kakashi's thoughts were interrupted as he saw Hinata charging him. Knowing how dangerous Hinata's Jiyuken, gentle fist, fighting style was, Kakashi was glad he didn't have his book to occupy one of his hands. Hinata started off with a series of basic jabs and open palm strikes aimed more for testing his defenses than actually hitting him. Kakashi barely managed to avoid each blow, knowing that a single glancing blow could disable his arm. Hinata's strikes started coming faster and faster, making Kakashi sweat. Hinata suddenly aimed an open-palmed blow to Kakashi's chest, causing him to leap backwards. As he did so, he heard Hinata yell, "Now," before she leapt backwards. Kakashi's eye widened as he saw 3 Fuma shuriken flying towards him. His eye reached the size of dinner plates as he heard Sasuke yell, "Tenka!" And all 3 of the weapons were surrounded in red flames. Kakashi twisted his body in ways that would leave him sore the next day to avoid the attack, only to see a 4th Fuma shuriken in the shadow of the 3rd. The first 2 had been meant to place him in the path of the 3rd, and the shadow shuriken would get him if he hadn't seen it. Kakashi rolled to the side, only to watch in amazement as the shuriken moved to follow him. Kakashi waited till the last moment to dodge to the side, and still the shuriken almost had him. A loud poof and a cloud of smoke appeared as Naruto dropped his henge and grabbed both the bells as he landed and rolled away from Kakashi. Kakashi then felt something hit him in the neck and he blacked out. Kakashi regained consciousness and found himself staring at his 3 students. They were sitting on the ground and looking up at him. Glancing around, Kakashi was surprised to see the alarm clock was just about to reach noon and he was the one tied to the stump. He looked at his students again, evaluating their expressions and mood. Naruto sat on the ground with Gisho on his shoulder and both bells in his hand. The kitsune still clutched Kakashi's beloved Icha Icha Paradise Volume 2 in his mouth and didn't seem like he would let go anytime soon. Both of the pair had their ears and noses focused on Kakashi, making sure he didn't pull a Kawarimi. Hinata was next in line, her Byakugan active as she watched for any chakra gathering in places that would signal a jutsu being performed. Sasuke was the last one he looked at. He had a Fuma shuriken in his hand and looked ready to throw it at a moment's notice. Kakashi then took a look at his situation. He was tied up with a bunch of intricate knots that he couldn't reach in front, with every limb restrained so he couldn't move them at all. He was amused to see thin strands of wire around each finger, preventing the usage of hand seals by securing the hands in an open position. Finally, Kakashi found that his supply pouch, shuriken and kunai holsters, and his flak jacket were all piled behind Hinata so she could keep an eye on them with her Byakugan. Kakashi was impressed. The kids had really paid attention to Iruka's lectures on restraining captives. Kakashi chuckled. "I'm impressed. You 3 should know something. You already passed the first part of the Genin exam before you even got assigned to me." All 3 of the friends stared at Kakashi and he continued, "When you worked together to fight Mizuki, Ken-sensei knew you 3 would make a good team. This was just to make sure everything was official and so I could evaluate your skill. I have to admit that I'm surprised. Naruto's Kage Bushin acted recklessly to make me think that it was the real Naruto. Then Naruto or another Kage Bushin attacked with his katana and distracted me while Sasuke prepared to ambush me with his jutsu. Gisho stole my book and got me into a position where Sasuke could attack me. When I countered him, Naruto snuck away and joined up with Sasuke. Hinata then attacked me, forcing me to focus all of my attention on her, allowing her to maneuver me into position so Sasuke's Fuma Shuriken could be put to use. The fire kept my attention on the 3 obvious shuriken and distracted me from noticing Naruto disguised as a Fuma Shuriken in the shadow of the 3rd flaming shuriken. As Naruto passed me, he dropped his henge and grabbed the bells. Then Hinata hit me from behind and knocked me out. I'm guessing all 3 of you worked together to tie me up? Seeing all 3 nod, Kakashi smiled. You 3 are the first 3 to get the bells on the first try using teamwork. But there are only 2 bells, so one of you will have to fail this exam. Naruto shrugged and tossed a bell to Sasuke and Hinata each. The Hokage must be ready to give up his life for the lives of the village and his subordinates, said the blonde when his friends were about to protest. Hinata shook her head. No, Naruto-kun, I should go back. As the Hyuga clan heiress, I have been taught to put the good of all before personal feelings. Konoha needs both you and Sasuke as shinobi since you are so strong, said Hinata before she tossed her bell back to Naruto. Sasuke snorted and said, I did barely anything dangerous. It was you 2 who were taking all the risks and engaging Kakashi-sensei in taijutsu. Besides, Naruto is in need of more instruction that the academy can offer and Hinata is needed for her medical training. Sasuke threw his bell to Hinata, after which all 3 of the friends started chuckling at the musical bells. Kakashi was openly staring at his team, amazed at how carefree they were over the possibility of returning to the academy. Sensei was right, they do make a great team. Their skills complement one another and they used them to their advantage. Naruto used his familiarity with his father's training methods to guess what I would do and I played right into their hands, thought the Junin. Now that you've all decided you each want to go back to the academy, I can tell you that you all pass. Now will you let me go, said Kakashi. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata all looked at one another and said, Nah, this is punishment for being late. Before grinning and running off with Gisho still carrying Kakashi's book, the silver-haired Junin tried to wiggle his way out of the ropes, desperate to catch the kids before they told Kyuubi what he had been reading. Kyuubi had always hated Jiraiya's books and warned Kakashi that if she caught him reading them in her house or in front of Naruto and Sasuke she would burn the book without warning. Ken grinned as he looked at his former student. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata had stopped by his office to tell him they passed and what happened to Kakashi. Ken had checked out the training ground in his crystal ball and had a good laugh at the genius Kakashi being outwitted by 3 academy graduates that just became genin before coming to talk to his former student. Well Kakashi, I can't say I didn't warn you that Naruto was extremely mischievous and would prank you if you let your guard down. He has been itching to take down his uncle Kakashi for a long time. Be glad Sasuke and Hinata convinced him to not do some of the other things he is capable of, said Ken. Kakashi nodded, frowning slightly as an itch made itself known on his back. Sensei, could you please untie me? Asked the silver-haired Junin. Ken bent down and quickly cut the ropes holding Kakashi to the log and undid the wires keeping his hands stiff. Thanks Sensei, now I have to find those kids and tell them when to meet tomorrow. Ken shook his head and grabbed Kakashi's shoulder before he could run off. Kakashi, they showed her the book. She said that after I untied you I could warn you and then you had 5 minutes to hide. Kakashi froze for a second before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Kyuubi stepped out of the trees and scowled at her husband, a large frying pan in her hands. You know you just gave him false hope that he can escape, no one can hide from my foxes. Exclaimed Kyuubi. Ken shrugged, already hearing distant barks and yips that showed the foxes Kyuubi had summoned were on the scent of the fleeing Junin. Kyuubi kissed Ken's cheek before walking off and singing, Kakashi, where are you? In a creepy voice. Ken disappeared and reappeared at his home, where teams 7, 8 and 10 were having a slumber party to celebrate passing the genin exam. He found them eating pizza and drinking soda as they watched a movie about the legendary Sennin of Konoha. Naruto had paused the DVD on a current picture of Jiraiya and was explaining all his peeping spots that he knew about to the girls so they could be on the lookout for him in the future the next time they were in the baths. Ken chuckled as Naruto did the funky dance Jiraiya used to introduce himself to people he had met for the first time. Ken's laughter brought all the new genin's attention to him and he cleared his throat. I'm here to congratulate all of you on passing the genin exam. From now on you 9 are proud shinobi of Konoha, and I know you will train hard and make us proud." With those inspirational words, Ken left the kids to their movie, with the warning that Kyuubi had foxes watching them and any naughty stuff would result in them being forced to do missions at the Konoha home for elderly shinobi. All the genin were suitably scared and promised to behave, though Hinata didn't move from her seat on Naruto's lap. Kyuubi soon came in with her frying pan bearing the imprint of Kakashi's head and giving Naruto a chance to tell the others about his mother's standing threat regarding Kakashi's books. All the new genin had a fun evening and fell asleep in their sleeping bags, though one of Naruto's tails snuck out of his bag and into Hinata's for her to cuddle. The quiet of the Konoha forest was disturbed by the slight whisper of displaced air as Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata darted from tree to tree. All 3 genin wore a headpiece radio and were stalking an elusive foe. A short distance away, Kakashi sat in the mission command center, aka a clearing with a big rock he could sit on to read his porn, and contacted his subordinates. "What's the distance to the target?" he asked. 5 meters, I'm ready anytime," said Sasuke, to which Naruto and Hinata agreed. "Okay, go," said Kakashi. All 3 genin ran from their hiding places to pounce on their target, which tried to get away, only to be caught by a red blur that pinned it to the ground. "Good job, Gisho," exclaimed Naruto as he grabbed the cat his pet had subdued. The cat reacted by trying to use Naruto's face as a scratching post until Hinata used a pressure point to calm the cat down. "Ribbon on the left ear, are you sure this is the target, Tora?" asked Kakashi over the radio. "Yeah, we've only caught this cat 10 times, growled Sasuke. It was true, this was the 10th time in 12 days that they had to catch Tora the cat. Kiba, Shino, and Sakura had the unfortunate job once. Akamaru ended up chasing Tora through the forest for hours and the team vowed to never go on a cat retrieval mission again." "Good, lost pet, Tora, search mission complete," said Kakashi before he slipped his book back into its carrying pouch and appeared next to his students in a cloud of smoke for the walk back to Konoha. Team 7 could only stare at Tora in sympathy as the cat was hugged by its owner Madame Shijimi, the wife of the Fire Country daimyo. "Oh, my cute little Tora-chan. I was so worried," cooed the lady as she practically strangled the cat. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata all had the same thought running through their heads. No wonder it ran away, while Gisho was thanking Kami-sama for making him a fox and not a dog or cat. Sarutobi, who assigned the missions to Shinobi to allow Ken more time for reading mission reports, puffed on his pipe before picking up a slip of paper and reading it. "Now, Kakashi's team number 7. Your next mission is, babysitting an elder's grandson, shopping in the neighboring village, and help with the potato digging," said the former Hokage. Naruto took a deep breath and yelled, "No. No, no, no thank you. Give us something more interesting, we've been doing these lame missions for the past few weeks already." While Sasuke didn't voice his opinion, the glare he was directing at Sarutobi made it clear he agreed with Naruto. Hinata's right eye was twitching, a sure sign that she was containing her frustration. Kakashi's sweat dropped and thought, "I thought it was about time for this." Iruka slammed his hands on the large desk he was sharing with Sarutobi and yelled, "You idiot, you're just a rookie. Everyone starts off with the simple missions and works their way up," as Sarutobi sighed. "But we keep getting the crappiest missions possible. I've been dragged through a minefield by a huge dog, almost got swept over a waterfall, and I've been barfed on by 5 different babies in the last 10 days. Naruto's tirade would have continued if Kakashi hadn't bonked him on the head and said, "Be quiet you." Sarutobi sighed and said, "Naruto, it seems I have to explain to you what these missions are all about. Listen, every day the village receives numerous requests, from babysitting to assassinations. Each request is written down on these lists and divided into an A, B, C, or D ranking based on difficulty. This village is also divided based on skill, starting with your father and me to the Junin, Chunin, and Genin. The missions are then handed out by us at the top to ninjas based on their abilities. And if the mission is completed successfully, we receive payment from the client. You guys just recently became Genin, D-ranked missions are perfect for you." Naruto eagerly wrote down everything Sarutobi said in a small notebook he carried with the words "How to be Hokage" written on it. This notebook had any lectures Naruto heard on what it meant to be Hokage and how to fulfill the Hokage's duties inside it. Naruto checked to make sure he had everything before putting the notebook away and looking at Sarutobi. With all due respect, Sandame, I feel I am not being challenged with just the training our team does in these missions. Sasuke, Hinata-chan, and I already have excellent teamwork and we need to get some experience outside the village. If we are not allowed some slightly more difficult missions, how can we see how we fare in the outside world? Could we at least have a mission that takes us farther than the neighboring village? Asked Naruto. Sarutobi was impressed. Naruto's arguments were valid and reasonable, especially since Ken had requested that the new teams get a few easy C-rank missions soon to give them more experience for the Chunin exam. Okay, if you want it that much, I'll give you a C-rank mission. It's a protection mission for a certain individual, said Sarutobi with a slight smirk. Yada, cheered Naruto as Gisho let out an excited yip and Sasuke and Hinata's faces bore happy expressions. Who are we escorting? A daimyo? A princess? Demanded Naruto. Calm down, I'm about to introduce him, said Sarutobi as he turned to a side door. You can come in now, he called. The door slid open to reveal a thick-set older man wearing a large backpack with a towel around his neck and a bottle of some alcoholic beverage in his hand. Naruto's nose told him it might be sake, but he couldn't be sure. The man reeked of sweat and alcohol, making it hard to breathe for Naruto and Gisho, who both had slightly green looks to their faces. What's this? They're all a bunch of super brats, said the man as he took a sip from his bottle before leaning against the doorframe. Especially the shortest one with the super stupid looking face. Are you really a ninja? Hey, demanded the guy. Naruto growled. He hated people mocking his height. When he had been younger, some bullies had teased him about being the runt of the litter, something no fox would want to be called. I'll kill you, yelled Naruto before Kakashi grabbed the back of his orange jumpsuit to keep him from leaping at their client and losing them the job. What's the point of killing the person we're supposed to protect? Baka? Demanded the Junin. The old man stared at Naruto and said, I am the super expert bridge builder Tazuna. I expect you to provide me super protection until I get back to my country and complete the bridge. Kakashi dismissed his team to pack for the mission, telling them to meet him outside the gates to Konoha in 1 hour. Naruto smiled as he looked at the large forest they would be traveling through for the first part of their journey. Let's go, yelled the Hanyu. Naruto was practically bouncing up and down with suppressed energy, causing Hinata to giggle. What are you so excited about? Asked Tazuna. This is my first mission that will take me so far from the village. I've lived here my whole life and I can't wait to see new places. Exclaimed Naruto. Hey, am I really going to be safe with this brat? Demanded Tazuna. Well, I'm a Junin, so don't worry, said Kakashi sheepishly. The masked Junin wished Naruto would lay off on the antics. It made it hard to keep a serious mood. Word of advice, old man, Naruto is one of our strongest genin. If he wanted to, he could rip you apart, said Sasuke coldly, not at all pleased with Tazuna's attitude. Yeah, one day I'll take the title of Hokage. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, remember it? Exclaimed Naruto. Tazuna took a swig from his bottle and said, Hokage is the village's #1 ninja, right? I doubt someone like you could become it. Shut up. I am prepared to do whatever it takes to gain the Hokage title. Once I become Hokage, everyone will acknowledge my skill, even you old man. No, I won't, brat, said Tazuna, even if you did become Hokage. Hinata and Kakashi had to restrain an angry Naruto and Sasuke from attacking Tazuna with intent to cause the bridge builder bodily harm. I said stop, morons, groaned Kakashi. This is going to be a long trip, sighed the Junin to himself. Unknown to everyone except Naruto and Gisho, 2 pairs of eyes were watching the small group from the treetops. Anyo, Tazuna-san? Asked Hinata after an hour of silent walking with Naruto and Gisho out in front of the group to scout for enemies. What? Was the terse reply. Tazuna thought Hinata was a timid girl who shouldn't even be on this mission. You're from the Wave Country, right? Asked Hinata. Yeah, what about it? Asked Tazuna. Hinata addressed her next question to her sensei. Anyo, Kakashi-sensei? Do they have ninjas in that country too? Kakashi started to answer, but a Naruto Kage Bushin appeared next to Hinata and beat him to it. No, Wave is a small island country with no hidden village. This makes it a good hiding place for missing nin, since there aren't a bunch of shinobi running around all the time. While several small countries like the New Sound, Waterfall, Grass, and Rain do have their own hidden villages, the 5 largest countries, Konoha, Mist, Cloud, Sand, and Stone, are referred to as the Great 5 Shinobi countries. Also, these 5 are the only countries whose leader receives the name Kage. These 5 Kages, Hokage, Mizukage, Raikage, Kazekage, and Tsuchikage, are known as the 5 shadows and reign over the thousands of ninjas in the world, said the Naruto clone. Kakashi smiled and ruffled the clone's hair as he said, "Naruto is absolutely correct." The clone scowled and disappeared in a puff, though not before Kakashi caught a warning glance the clone sent ahead of them. "Don't worry, there won't be any ninja combat in a C-rank mission," said Kakashi as he noticed Hinata and Sasuke had caught the clone's warning as well and while looking relaxed, were actually ready to attack or evade as needed. "Then there won't be any contact with foreign ninjas?" asked Hinata. Her Byakugan was active, though she used an genjutsu to mask the telltale veins around her eyes. "Of course not," exclaimed Kakashi before he started chuckling. Sasuke noticed Tazuna looked nervous but didn't say anything, his mind already taking in the area that could shortly become a fighting zone. Up ahead, Naruto had stopped and yelled, "Hey sensei, can we stop for lunch soon? I'm hungry enough for 2 people? No Naruto, no stopping until 2 in the afternoon when there is some shade to sit in," called Kakashi. "Stupid sensei," muttered Naruto as he kicked a rock towards the puddle lying on the ground behind Kakashi before turning around. No one seemed to notice the 2 figures rising up out of the puddle together after Naruto's stone passed. 2 shinobi with breathing masks and horned kiri, hidden mist, Hide on their heads and a large metal gauntlet on one arm with a chain connecting the 2 gauntlets stared at the group for a second before the smaller figure leapt into the air and dashed around Kakashi, encircling him with the chain. The whole group stared at their attackers in shock before the smaller of the 2 said, "One down," and the 2 darted away from each other, pulling the chain tight and slicing Kakashi into bloody pieces before he could escape. "Kakashi-sensei!" yelled Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata, temporarily in shock at seeing their sensei killed right in front of them. Then Naruto heard the words 2 down in his right ear. The 2 Kiri shinobi tossed their chain over in front of Naruto in preparation to decapitate him with it. Sasuke leapt into the air and pulled a shuriken and kunai from his hip holsters. The black-haired boy threw the shuriken first, pinning the chain to a nearby tree. Sasuke's kunai then sank into the tree through the hole in the middle of the shuriken and effectively trapped the chain on the tree. Sasuke then landed on the 2 Kiri shinobi's gauntlets before grabbing the gauntlets with his hands and kicking both enemies in the face at once. The Kiri shinobi quickly did something with their gauntlets and disengaged the chain, allowing them to separate. One shinobi went after Naruto and swiped at him with the gauntlet, only to watch in surprise as Naruto smirked and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto suddenly appeared back where the 2 masked shinobi had been hiding in the puddle, having disguised himself as the rock his clone had kicked earlier. Naruto charged forward and engaged the masked shinobi in taijutsu. The Kiri shinobi managed to get in a single good blow on Naruto's hand that gave him 2 gashes on the back of his hand before Naruto whipped his katana out of its sheath in a quick draw and sliced of his opponent's arm with the gauntlet on it. Naruto then drove his fist into the Kiri shinobi's stomach, knocking him out. The taller of the 2 masked shinobi had charged towards Tazuna, only to see Hinata appear in his way and yell, "Hake Sho Kaden." The chakra Hinata released as she flung the Kiri shinobi into the air, where he prepared to plummet down on the girl and the man she was guarding. However, he didn't get the chance as Sasuke had appeared below him and yelled, "Anayu Renden, Sun and Moon Combo," as he flipped over his opponent to deliver a crescent kick to the enemy's chest, sending him towards the ground for a collision that knocked him out. Kakashi appeared in a puff of smoke and regarded the 2 disabled enemies. "Very good, I was wondering if I would have to step in," he said with a smile. Kakashi then turned towards Naruto. "Naruto, their claws are soaked in poison. We have to remove it quickly. Your fast healing ability will only hold off the damage for a little while. We must open the wound and release the poisoned blood from your body. Don't move much, the poison will spread." Kakashi then turned to their client. "Tazuna-san, I need to talk to you," he said before tying the 2 defeated shinobi to a tree. These are the demon brothers, Nuke Nin from Kiri. They're known to continue fighting no matter what, said Kakashi. The defeated shinobi glared at Kakashi. How did you read our movements? Demanded the taller of the two. Kakashi shrugged and said, ask Naruto. He's the one that told me there were two enemies preparing an ambush. All eyes focused on Naruto, who was standing still where he had been when Kakashi told him about the poison. Naruto grinned and said, I could smell you guys. Plus, there hasn't been rain for several days, so how could a puddle be on the road during such a sunny day? By the way, one of you needs to look into getting a new deodorant, your armpits stink. Kakashi ruffled Naruto's hair as he said, excellent, you're going to be a fine tracker someday, Naruto. If you knew they were there, why did you let the brats fight? Asked Tazuna. If I had wanted to I could have killed these two instantly, but there was something I needed to find out. Who these two were after, replied Kakashi. What do you mean? Asked Tazuna. Meaning, were they after you or one of us? We haven't heard that there are shinobi after you. Our mission was to simply protect you from thieves or gangs. This has now become at least a B-class mission. This was supposed to be simple protection until you completed the bridge. If it was known that ninjas were after you, this mission would have been set as the more expensive B rank. I'm sure you had a reason, but it causes problems when you lie about the mission. We are now operating outside of our duties. Furthermore, we should return to the village to treat Naruto, explained Kakashi. Kakashi heard Hinata gasp, Naruto-kun, and turned to see Naruto plunge a kunai into his hand, leaving a larger wound that covered both of the gashes he had received. Blood splattered onto the ground, some of it black from poison. With this kunai, I'll protect the old man. We're continuing this mission, exclaimed Naruto as he held his hand up in front of his face and grinned a smile no one had ever seen before. This was the smile of a predator about to bag its prey. Kakashi sighed and said, Naruto, it's good that you are releasing the poison bet anymore and… Here Kakashi smiled with his visible eye curving upward. You'll die from lack of blood. Seriously? Naruto scowled and sniffed the wound. Finding no traces of the poison, he licked the wound clean and spat the blood out before allowing Hinata to wrap a bandage around the wound. Hinata smiled as she watched Naruto's cut heal before her eyes as she wrapped it. Tazuna walked up to Kakashi and said, Sensei, I have to talk with you. The two adults walked a short distance away for some privacy. You're right, this job is most likely outside of your duties. It turns out that a super dangerous man is after my life. Super dangerous man? Asked Kakashi as his visible eyebrow rose upwards. Who? You've probably at least heard his name before, said Tazuna, causing Naruto's ears to swivel in his direction to catch every word. The wealthy shipping magnate, a man named Gato. Kakashi's eye widened and he exclaimed, huh? Gato, from that Gato company? He's said to be one of the world's few extremely wealthy people. Yes, officially he runs a large shipping company, but secretly he sells drugs and other illegal items, using ninja and gang members to take over business contracts and countries. He's a very nasty man. It was about a year ago when he set his eyes on the Wave country. Through money and violence, he quickly took control of the country's shipping industry. Gato now has a monopoly on all business traffic in the country. The only thing he has to fear now is the completion of the bridge, said Tazuna. Hinata frowned and said, since you're building the bridge you're in the way. So, those ninja were hired by Gato? Asked Sasuke. But what I don't understand is if you knew ninjas could be after you, why did you hide that fact when you hired us? Asked Kakashi. The Wave country is super poor, an. He says super a lot, doesn't he? Even the daimyo has no money. Of course, we don't have much money either, not enough for the expensive B-rank mission, said Tazuna. Team 7 stared at the bridge builder for a minute before he said, well, if you quit the mission now, I will definitely be killed. But don't worry about it. If I die, my cute 10-year-old grandson will just cry for a few days. Oh yeah, and my daughter will live a sad life hating Konoha shinobi forever. But it won't be your fault, not at all. Naruto was practically growling. He could tell that Sasuke and Hinata were fighting the urge to tie up and gag Tazuna and drag him behind them right then for his rude remarks. Well, I guess we have no choice. We will protect you at least until you get back to your country, said Kakashi. Wow, it's huge, whispered Naruto as he took in the uncompleted bridge. The entire group was in a small boat heading into the Wave country under the cover of the coastal mist. "We'll be there soon," said the boat's guide, Tazuna. "It looks like we've avoided detection so far, but, just in case, we'll take the route that has more vegetation. It will make it harder to spot us." Tazuna nodded, not daring to make a sound. The boat entered and passed through a tunnel, and Team 7 saw a bunch of mangrove trees forming small vegetation islands in the middle of a large river separating the city on either side of the canal. The boat pulled up to a small dock and Team 7 disembarked with Tazuna. "This is it for me. Goodbye and good luck," whispered the guide before he pushed off and disappeared into the mist with his boat as Tazuna thanked him. "Okay, get me home safely," said the bridge builder. Yes, sighed Kakashi. "If we get attacked again, it will surely not be a Chunin, but a Junin," he thought. Naruto and Hinata had their senses strained to the max to keep on the lookout for enemies. Naruto was slightly in front of everyone again, with Gisho tucked into his jacket. The Kitsune Hanyu suddenly stopped and whipped out a shuriken just as Hinata gasped. Naruto threw the shuriken into a nearby bush just as Hinata said, "Naruto-kun." Swiftly making their way through the bushes, Team 7 stared at a white rabbit that had frozen in shock, Naruto's shuriken buried in the trunk of a tree an inch above the rabbit's head and right between its ears. Hinata immediately scooped up the bunny and set it down in the bushes away from the group. "There was someone there, I swear," yelled Naruto, one of his eyes rolling to point into a tree above and to the right of him. Kakashi made sure not to look in the indicated direction. "That's a snow rabbit, but it is only white if it hasn't been in the sunlight for a long time. This rabbit was kept in a cage for Kawarimi. Looks like Naruto was right and our foe barely avoided his attack," thought Kakashi. Up in the tree, a figure peered through the leaves at the group on the ground. "I see, no wonder the demon brothers didn't stand a chance. Konoha's copy ninja, Sharingan Kakashi," thought the figure before they leapt into the air. Kakashi reacted instantly, yelling, "Everyone down, now." Naruto and Sasuke both moved quickly. Sasuke grabbed Tazuna and pulled him down while Naruto did the same for Hinata. A large sword spun through the air where their necks would have been and slammed into a nearby tree. As Kakashi spun to face the sword, a shinobi appeared standing on the handle of the giant weapon. "Well, if it isn't Kiri's nuke nin Momochi Zabuza," said Kakashi, "everybody get back. This one's on a whole other level." Kakashi reached for his Hite 8 as he said, "Against him, it will be a little tough unless I do this." "You appear to be Sharingan Kakashi," said Zabuza. "Sorry, but the old man is mine." "Yeah right, kick his ass Kakashi-sensei," yelled Naruto. "Thanks for the encouragement, Naruto. Surround and protect Tazuna-san. Do not enter the fight, that's the kind of teamwork needed here," said Kakashi, not once taking his focus off Zabuza. "Zabuza, first, fight me," said the Junin as he raised his Hite 8 to reveal a Sharingan eye in his left eye socket, though a scar around the eye showed it was surgically implanted. "Ah, I already get to see the famous Sharingan. I'm honored," said Zabuza as he finally turned to face the group. "When I was a member of Kiri's assassin team, I possessed the usual bingo book, a kind of who's who of our enemies. It had quite the extensive write-up on you, including a mention of your impressive record. The man who has penetrated and copied over 1,000 different jutsu, Kakashi the copy ninja. Yeah, Kakashi-sensei is the coolest, even if he is a pervert," yelled Naruto, causing Sasuke and Hinata to sigh and resolve to whack him on the head after this was over. "Now, let's end all the talking. I have to kill that old man," said Zabuza as he glared at Tazuna. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata quickly formed a triangle, putting themselves in between the nuke nin and his target, while Gisho leapt to Tazuna's backpack as a last line of defense. Zabuza smirked and shifted his gaze to Kakashi. "But, it seems I have to kill you first, Kakashi," he said before he pulled his sword from the tree and disappeared from sight, only to reappear on the nearby water. All three genin stared in shock. They had seen shinobi stand on walls and ceilings in Konoha, but standing on the water was new to them. Mist started to appear as Zabuza raised one arm straight up and positioned his other hand as if he were a parent telling their child to be quiet. "Ninpo. Kirigakure no jutsu," said Zabuza, before he disappeared from sight. The mist was so thick that no one but Naruto could have figured out where Zabuza was, and even he was stumped by inexperience. "He'll come after me first." Momochi Zabuza, as a member of the Hidden Mist, he was known as an expert in silent killing. Letting your guard down around him buys you a direct trip to heaven, said Kakashi. The Junin paused for a second before saying, I haven't necessarily mastered every aspect of the Sharingan, so all of you stay on your toes. Zabuza's voice suddenly echoed through the mist. There are 8 targets. Throat, spinal column, lungs, liver, the jugular vein, the subclavian vein, kidneys and heart. So many choices, what vital, vulnerable place shall I choose? Haha. The sound of his voice had all 3 genin shivering from fear. Naruto could easily hear Hinata's heartbeat. Don't worry Hinata, Kakashi-sensei won't let anything happen to us, whispered Naruto. Sasuke heard Naruto's words of encouragement, but he was so nervous sweat was soaking the collar of his shirt. This terrible bloodlust, I haven't felt this scared since Oka-san was told about Kakashi-sensei reading his book during training. A Junin, determined to make a kill, knowing my life is in his hands. I hate it, you start wanting to die, just to end the suspense, he thought. Sasuke's terror-filled thoughts were interrupted by Kakashi saying, Sasuke, calm down. Even if he gets me, I'll still protect you. Sasuke stared at Kakashi as the masked Junin turned his head slightly, letting the Uchiha see Kakashi's left eye curved upwards as he smiled and said, I will never let my comrades die. Sasuke relaxed slightly, even as Naruto and Hinata both stiffened as their senses caught something. Zabuza's eerie voice echoed through the mist, I wouldn't bet on that. He suddenly appeared in between the genin and Tazuna, preparing to slice all of them in half at the waist. Game over, said the nuke nin, just before Naruto's foot and Hinata's palm snapped towards him, forcing him to block with his sword for fear of Hinata's Jayuken. Kakashi suddenly appeared and tackled Zabuza, stabbing his chest with a kunai. Sasuke had pushed Tazuna out of the way of Zabuza's disrupted attack and placed himself between Zabuza and the bridge builder. A second Zabuza suddenly appeared behind Kakashi, sword raised so he could slice Kakashi in half. Sensei, behind you, yelled Naruto as he pointed at the surprise attack. Kakashi whipped his head around as the Zabuza he had been fighting turned into water and fell to the ground in a puddle. Zabuza slashed Kakashi in half, only to see the Junin also turn to water. Mizu Bushin no Jutsu? He was able to copy me, even in this mist, thought Zabuza. A kunai was suddenly pressed against his neck, causing the nuke nin to freeze. Don't move, game over, said Kakashi, causing Naruto to give a small cheer that was quickly stopped as Zabuza started laughing. Hey, you think it's over? You just don't get it, it will take more than just mimicking me like an ape to defeat me. But you are good. In that short time, you duplicated my Mizu Bushin no Jutsu and by making your clone say something you'd have said yourself. You ensured all my attention would be focused on it while you yourself used the Kirigakure no Jutsu. Too bad for you, I'm not that easy to fool, said Zabuza before he turned into water as another appeared behind Kakashi again. Zabuza was a Mizu Bushin too, yelled Naruto, annoyed he hadn't smelled the difference. Zabuza swung a sword in an attempt to make Kakashi shorter by several feet, only to miss as Kakashi dropped to the ground. Zabuza didn't let that faze him and continued with him momentum and dug the sword blade into the ground so he could use the handle of his sword as a pivot to kick Kakashi hard in the chest. Kakashi went flying, straight into the water. Zabuza pulled his sword out of the ground and charged forward, only to skid to a stop to avoid the caltrops Kakashi had managed to drop behind him. Zabuza disappeared just before Kakashi surfaced. The Junin suddenly heard Zabuza behind him again as he said, Fool, Suiru no Jutsu, water prison skill. And water swirled up to trap Kakashi in a sphere of water. Haha, that prison is inescapable. You're trapped, said Zabuza. I thought I could go underwater and regroup, but it was a tactical error, thought Kakashi. Sorry, but you're being annoying. Sit still while I take care of your little friends, said Zabuza as he formed a Mizu Bushin on the shore. The Mizu Bushin charged towards Tazuna and Sasuke, only to find Naruto in the way. The clone kicked Naruto hard, knocking off his Hite 8. You three aren't even worthy of being killed by me or being called ninja, said the clone as he slammed his foot down on Naruto's Hite 8. To be a true ninja you must be skilled enough to have a page in my bingo book. You're just trash. Everyone listen. Take Tazuna and run. This is a fight you can't win. If he wants to hold me in this water prison, he can't leave this place. If his Mizu Bushin gets more than a certain distance from his body he loses control of it, so get out of here, yelled Kakashi. Naruto slowly stood up, his back to everyone but Kakashi and Zabuza and his bangs shading his eyes. Kakashi-sensei, you said the most important thing a shinobi could have is teamwork. What kind of team leaves their leader in a situation like this? He said, so softly everyone barely heard him. Naruto raised his head so Zabuza could see his eyes. The new nin's smug face turned to one of puzzlement as he saw Naruto's eyes were red. Naruto suddenly charged forward, head-butting the Mizu Bushin before using his hands to push himself into a back flip that placed him in front of Hinata and Sasuke. Naruto stood up and tied his Hite 8 that he had grabbed back on. Hey you, what's life like without eyebrows, freak? Asked Naruto. Both the real Zabuza and his clone twitched slightly, showing Naruto's jab had struck a nerve. I've got some new listings for your bingo book right here. Me, the guy who is going to be the next Hokage of Konoha, Uzumaki Naruto. The Avenger and future head of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Sasuke. And the most beautiful kunoichi of Konoha and Hyuga heir, Hyuga Hinata. Konoha shinobi. Sasuke and Hinata both smiled. Naruto had used that speech before in the past to describe their group and scare off people who were bullying younger kids. Tazuna was looking at Naruto with new respect. At our first meeting, I thought the little fellow was just an inconsequential brat. Seeing him so far, I think he will become Hokage, he thought. Sasuke, Hinata, listen up. I have a plan. We're using the tried and true method, exclaimed Naruto. Sasuke smirked, already catching on to what Naruto had planned. Ready when you are Dobi, he said. Naruto grinned and said, Hinata, you protect the old man. I know you won't let anything get past you. Hinata nodded, pulling out a second kunai and adopting a ready stance. Time for us to rock and roll, said Naruto with a huge grin. Heh, you're very sure of yourselves, but do you really think you stand a chance against me? Asked the Mizu Bushin. Zabuza suddenly glared at Naruto and Sasuke, causing them to freeze for a split second as his huge killing intent hit them. Before Sasuke could regain control of his body, Zabuza had shoulder-tackled him and slammed him to the ground with his elbow. Sasuke screamed as blood shot out of his mouth. Crap, time for drastic measures, thought Naruto as he made his favorite seal. Kage Bushin no Jutsu, roared the Hanyu as a horde of clones surrounded the Mizu Bushin. So, Kage Bushins, and quite a lot of them, said the Mizu Bushin as it released Sasuke and grabbed its sword. Ready or not, yelled the Naruto clones before they all leapt into the air with kunai drawn and dog-piled the Mizu Bushin. All was still for a second before all the Naruto clones were sent flying by the Mizu Bushin swinging his sword. Naruto skidded backwards and reached into his backpack for something. Sasuke, he yelled as he tossed a folded Fuma shuriken to his brother. Sasuke leapt and caught the shuriken and rolled as he landed so he was facing Zabuza. As Sasuke flicked his wrist and the Fuma shuriken blades slid into position as he stopped moving. Sasuke had his eye closed and then opened it to look at Zabuza over one of the shuriken's blades. Fuma shuriken, shadow windmill, said Sasuke before he leapt into the air and back-flipped to gain momentum before hurling the Fuma shuriken towards the Mizu Bushin. The Mizu Bushin yelled, Shuriken are useless against me. Only to see the spinning blade of death pass right by him and towards the real Zabuza holding Kakashi captive. At least this time you've had the sense to zero in on my true form, said both Zabuza at the same time. Amateur, yelled the real one as he grabbed the Fuma shuriken, only to see another one appear. A second shuriken in the shadow of the first? Yelled Zabuza in shock as Kakashi's eyes widened. Zabuza recovered from his moment of shock and hopped over the second shuriken while still maintaining his hold on Kakashi's prison. Sasuke smirked, watching as the second shuriken changed into Naruto with a puff of smoke. Here it goes, thought Naruto before he hurled a kunai at Zabuza, who had just turned to see what Sasuke was smirking about. The kunai was headed straight for Zabuza's face until he dodged to the side, breaking his hold on Kakashi. However, the kunai grazed his cheek and some blood fell towards the water. Zabuza glared at the falling Naruto and charged with him with the Fuma shuriken he held, only to hear Sasuke yell, Tenka, and the shuriken was surrounded in fire. Zabuza dropped the weapon, which hit the water at the same time as Naruto, just before Kakashi appeared between his student and Zabuza. Kakashi's single Sharingan blazed, causing Zabuza to emit a single gasp. Naruto surfaced and spat out some water he had swallowed, Sasuke's Fuma Shuriken safely secure in his belt. Excellent teamwork you two, especially your use of Kage Bushin and Henge Naruto and waiting to ignite the Shuriken Sasuke, said Kakashi. Zabuza managed to calm himself down as he said, so, you made me fly into such a rage that I unraveled the jutsu holding the water prison together. No, you didn't drop your jutsu, it was broken because you were forced to release it, said Kakashi, just so you know, the same jutsu won't work on me twice. Your move. Zabuza and Kakashi leapt apart and rapidly formed a long string of seals, ending with the rooster seal. Sweden Suiryuden no Jutsu, water style. Water dragon blast skill. Yelled both men as two giant water dragons formed and crashed together before canceling each other out with a huge splash of water into the air, revealing Kakashi and Zabuza locked in a stalemate. Kakashi was using a single kunai to block Zabuza's sword, somehow managing to exert the same force into the little knife weapon that Zabuza did into his giant blade. Something isn't right, thought Zabuza. The two fighters leapt apart and Zabuza started making gestures, only to see Kakashi mimic them. All of my moves, my gestures, he sees, thought Zabuza, only to have Kakashi complete his thought out loud. This next part goes Zabuza, Kakashi 3 times. Through them all. What? He's reading my mind? Damn him. He's got that sickeningly evil look in his eye, right? Faye, you're a pale imitation, Zabuza started to say, only to have Kakashi speak in sync with him, I'm the genuine article. No mere copycat stands a chance against me. Ow, you mimic me like a parrot. I'll close your beak for good, exclaimed Zabuza as he rapidly make hand seals before frozen shock as he seemed to see a mirror image of himself behind Kakashi. It's me? But that's impossible. Is this another of his illusions? Thought the Nuke Nin, not noticing that Kakashi finished the sequence of seals they both started. Sweden Daibakufu no Jutsu, water style. Giant waterfall, yelled Kakashi as the 3 comma-shaped marks of his Sharingan eye spun around. What? Exclaimed Zabuza. This is absurd. Before I could even finish my jutsu he used the same jutsu against me. I can't keep up with him. Zabuza's breath was driven from his body as he slammed into a tree. Immediately, a kunai hit each arm and leg, pinning him to the trunk. What, can you see the future? He gasped as Kakashi appeared on a branch above him. I foresee your death, said Kakashi as he prepared to administer the coup de grace. Suddenly, To Senbon, medical acupuncture needles, struck Zabuza in the neck and he fell to the ground, not moving. Everyone followed the needle's path to a pair of masked figures standing on a tree branch opposite where Kakashi was. Heh, looks like your prediction came true, said the taller of the two, who had 2 long braids framing the side of their face and their hair tied up under a small cap. The other, who had a Kusari Gama, sickle and chain weapon used by Kohaku of Inuyasha, in their belt, had short red hair. Kakashi teleported to Zabuza's side and checked for a pulse. He's dead, thought Kakashi as he turned his attention to the 2 masked shinobi. The taller one inclined their head and said, thank you for your help. I hope you don't mind our interfering, but we have been searching for the opportunity to kill Zabuza for a long time. Naruto couldn't be sure, but he thought the voice was that of a girl. He ran over to his friends, cursing inside his head that water was clogging his nose and making it hard to get a good scent. You two are Kiri shinobi hunters, are you not? Asked Kakashi as he eyed the two. The shorter one seemed to look towards the genin and Tazuna before inclining her head also and saying, you are correct. And if I'm not mistaken you are Sharingan Kakashi, the copy ninja. Kakashi nodded, while Tazuna looked confused. What's a shinobi hunter? He asked the genin. Hinata was the one who answered. Shinobi hunters track down and eliminate shinobi rouges and outlaws. They are excellent trackers and strong enough to take down a Junin-level shinobi. These two don't seem to be much older than us, but they're both already full-fledged shinobi hunters. They definitely aren't your average kids. Naruto was digging in his supply pouch for a handkerchief while this was going on and finally found one. Just before he could blow his nose, he sneezed loudly and shifted into his Hanyu form. The two hunter nin had appeared by Zabuza's corpse and were preparing to take it away. Naruto managed to clear his nose and took a deep sniff. They're both girls, strong chakra scent, something familiar about both of them, he thought before he dashed up to Kakashi. The taller hunter nin regarded Naruto for a moment before saying, "Your battle is over, for now, and the remains must be disposed of, lest they give up secrets to our foes." Kakashi nodded and was about to wish the two good luck when Naruto yelled, "He has a heartbeat, they're fakes." Both of the masked nin jerked in surprise, and Naruto could smell something that shocked him. Kitsune, he thought, even as the two grabbed Zabuza's body and disappeared instantly. "They're gone," groaned Naruto. "Did you get their scents?" asked Kakashi. Naruto shook his head. "Only one of them, they smelled like a kitsune. The other one I'm not sure about," he said. Sasuke had quietly explained Naruto's transformation to Tazuna, and the bridge builder said, "You guys must be tired. You can lick your wounds at my house." Kakashi started to take a step towards his client, only to freeze and fall over on his face. "Kakashi-sensei!" yelled Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata as they rushed to turn their sensei over to a more comfortable position. Hinata examined her teacher and grinned slightly. "You have chakra exhaustion, sensei. Nothing a little rest won't fix." Kakashi nodded, watching Naruto create a cage bushin to take his pack and allowed Tazuna to help him stand up and carry him fireman style as he led the way to his house.